What is a libertarian? Perhaps we need a Matt Walsh-style documentary for this one, but for now, we're going to see if we can figure this out. Tonight here, live in the LCI Green Room. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room. This is our live show at the Libertarian Christian Institute. Glad you are with us here. My name is Jacob Winograd. I am the host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here, part of our Christians for Liberty network. And tonight I have the honor and the privilege of moderating a debate that at least quite a few people in the libertarian world have been wanting to see for a long time. If you're new here, just take a minute to tell you about us. LCI exists to make the Christian case for liberty and to explore how the gospel shapes our understanding of society, economics, and politics, and to help Christians think clearly about freedom in a world that often pushes us in the opposite direction. So we're nearing the end of the year, and since we're a nonprofit, I'm doing the thing that all nonprofits are doing right now, which is asking you for your support if you want to support what we do here. Right now, we have a matching fundraising campaign. Every dollar that's donated between now and the end of the year is matched. So if you want to support the work we're doing here at LCI, you can go to libertarianchristians.com/donate. Now, tonight's debate grew out of conversations that I've had with both of the gentlemen we have tonight, but also just broader conversations happening in the libertarian movement right now. And the resolution that they've agreed to is this: libertarians ought to bite the bullet and support zero restrictions on public property and insist that it is always wrong to violate the non-aggression principle. So now that is sort of two things, but they're connected, and I think the debate will demonstrate that connection there. But the real heart of this debate, and what I titled this stream as, is I think something deeper. It's what does it really mean to be a libertarian, and how do we apply our principles when the real world throws us curveballs? How do we stay faithful to the core idea of liberty without drifting into a rigid dogmatism or a kind of moral fog? Or to use the debater's own words, Dave often is warning libertarians against ideological possession or paralysis, and Zulu is warning against pragmatism and whim worship. So I want to make it clear at the start, I like both Dave and Zulu. Dave introduced me to libertarianism, and he's constantly helping me with his podcast and the debates he does to analyze the moment we are in, the national global stage, from a libertarian perspective. Zulu has done commendable work on making the libertarian legal theory more accessible to people and explaining liberty and free markets in a way which utilizes current, cultural trends and humor and memery. And so, they've taken some shots at each other, which is part of the course on social media, just like libertarians fighting is part of the course for just our movement in general. But I think that this is a big win that we're having this debate if we take a minute to zoom out, because for a long time, libertarians, at least when I joined the movement, it seemed like the debate was over whether we should be radical or if we should be given over to respectability politics and trying to brand ourselves as the more moderate and centrist option. These days, the debates are sharper and they're more philosophical, and it's almost like who's the more radical. And I think that's just a better place to be in, where people actually care about consistency, moral grounding, and the implications of our views. And so for my audience in particular, I want the Christians, especially who are watching this show, to understand the real practical question to this resolution, which is, what do we do while we are living in this very fallen and statist world, where public schools are indoctrinating and harming our kids, and government owns land and resources that it shouldn't, monopolizes services that it shouldn't? We want privatization, but we're not there yet. So how do we navigate this in between without compromising our principles? So I hope that this debate is going to be productive. I'm going to now go ahead and bring our debaters up into the stage with me. To my left is host of Part of the Problem podcast, comedian, a very successful comedian, despite what many of his critics try to say otherwise. I have that Dave Smith bingo card, and it's just always the very. It's like they get this propaganda report. Make sure you say failed comedian, Dave Smith. And then to my right is coming to us from across the pond, as it were, Mr. LiquidZulu, host of his own channel, LiquidZulu. Glad to have you both with me here tonight. I think we're going to go ahead and get right into it. Zulu, if you want to go ahead and the way this debate's going to work is we're going to do opening statements, and then there'll be about they'll have an allotment of about 9 minutes each. And then after that, we'll go to just an open back and forth dialogue. And then probably about 30 minutes to the end, I'll start going and reading your guys' questions. Obviously, we'll prioritize super chats because there's probably just going to be a lot of comments tonight. I did want to, by the way, there was one comment though someone made at the outset, which I just thought would set the mood to be less serious. But free men die for $5. Thank you for that. Said my wife asked if her donut homestead made her look fat. I don't know if either of you have a good answer for that. That might be a real tough one. So, but thank you for that, free men die. Zulu, if you want to go ahead and get us started with your opening statement, defending again the resolution that libertarians bite the bullet and add restrictions on public property and to never violate the non-aggression principle.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully I don't lag out too much. I did close everything possible down, so hopefully not too bad. So this is a compound resolution. It has two parts. First, that it is correct to bite the bullet and support zero restrictions on public property, and second, that libertarians ought to insist that it is always wrong to violate the NEP. First, biting the bullet is a question both of competent debate strategy and intellectual integrity. I will prove that the bullet biter is correct on both fronts. As far as debate strategy is concerned, it is simply not possible to win a debate on any resolution against sufficiently competent opposition if one is not willing to bite any bullets. For every possible position one may come to in philosophy, there must exist reductio ad absurdum against said position. There will always be certain edge cases for any thesis. For there not to be any such edge cases means that there is no edge, meaning that the thesis is fuzzy and ill-defined. When you ask absurd questions, you get absurd answers. If I were to ask a mathematics student how many apples Mary sold at the end of the year, if she sells double the apples each day, and on the first day she sold 1 apple, they would tell me that she sold more than 1.5 times 10 to the 110 apples. That is orders of magnitude more than the total number of atoms in the observable universe. It is not valid for me to counter this by saying how absurd mathematics is, because there is no way for a woman to sell that many apples. Ask absurd questions, and you get absurd answers, in ethics or anywhere else. Take the Christian ethic of thou shalt not steal. Taken literally, this means that the literal God of all of existence tells you that you should not steal a penny to stop the Martians from blowing up the Earth. The Christians certainly can't hold that God might have made a mistake when he gave that commandment, so the reductio stands against any internally consistent Christian ethicist. The choice is either to abandon the original principle entirely, or bite the bullet and stick to it. This is why it is simply bad debate strategy to refuse to bite bullets. As we've all seen previously, in his debate with Andrew Wilson, Dave spent hours conceding every obvious libertarian position to statist arguments, up to the point that he refused to even bite the bullet on conscription being inherently immoral. The refusal to bite bullets and ground his arguments in a solid philosophy has left him impotent and forces him to latch onto whatever philosophy is provided to him in the moment. A debate is a logical flowing of argument between opponents. There is a precise logical method that determines who has won a debate, and it does not depend upon collapse or audience polling. If one participant refutes an argument from their opponent, and that refutation is not itself refuted, then that argument is considered lost for the opponent, and vice versa. What it means to not bite the bullet on some principle is to contradict that very principle. From this, it becomes trivial for one's opponent to flow through. So much for debate strategy. Biting the bullet is also essential for intellectual integrity. Integrity means that one is morally uncompromised. It is loyalty to one's rational convictions and values, the policy of acting in accordance with proper principles. Whenever one finds himself unwilling to bite the bullet, this means that they have abrogated a principle that they are attempting to uphold as true. They are trying to cheat reality on the altar of their random whims or cowardly sacrifice. They are giving up the true, the good, reality, for the false, the bad, nothing. This is the very mark of the disintegrated soul. Public property is merely one such instance of this general principle that libertarians must bite the bullet on. Indeed, the principle still applies here. What does it mean for there to be zero restrictions on public property? Well, it means that the government becomes completely laissez-faire with respect to it, that they will not interfere with it whatsoever. That is, it becomes immediately open to homesteading and can be rationally allocated to its most value-productive use. Dave has, in the past, attempted to strawman the zero restrictions position by sneaking various restrictions through the sally port. For instance, by positing a scenario where the government is still forcing people onto public property, preventing them from leaving, and in general maintaining the commons. Take a prison. Imagine if I were to say that the warden and the guards implemented a policy of zero restrictions imposed upon the prisoners with respect to the prison or any other public property. This would directly imply that the prisoners could simply walk out of the front door and nobody would stop them. Preventing people from leaving is a restriction also. But when it comes to reductions around this same policy implemented in all public schools, Dave holds on to the premise that people are still being forced to go and stay there. This is still a restriction. Imagine what it truly means for this policy to be applied to all public property. The state could have no permanent bases of operation, no courthouses, no White Houses, no military bases. In fact, no state-owned guns or cars. These are also public property of the polis. They are public servants, after all. If this policy were followed tomorrow, the state would be immediately reduced to a band of nomadic savages, completely incapable of maintaining a federal tax collection apparatus, war machine, welfare state, Federal Reserve, or pretty much anything else. They would be instantly turned into the random thief who waylays one on the side of the road in some Lysander Spooner hypothetical, a much preferable alternative to the current situation. I will bite that bullet 10 times out of 10. We absolutely should support the scenario of zero restrictions on public property. We are all faced with a choice when presented with such reductions ad absurdum. Either we find some way to deal with these problems within the objective framework of the NEP, or we abandon the NEP, throw up our hands, and claim that the principle is useless. I wonder what the philosophical term is for that latter option. Pragmatism, perhaps? This is the option that Dave has taken on this front. Instead of trying to work out NEP-compliant solutions to the problems he sees with public property, he reaches towards government solutions to what is decidedly a government problem. He wants to set the entire US military at the task of shutting down immigration. He wants this shit shut down by any means necessary. The second half of our resolution is that libertarians ought to insist that it is always wrong to violate the NEP. On what it means to be a libertarian, I quote Dave Smith. Libertarianism is the belief in self-ownership, private property rights, and the non-aggression principle. That is the best philosophically sound definition of it, which isn't circular. So, libertarianism must include a belief in the non-aggression principle. Thus, if they're to be intellectually honest, they must insist that it is always wrong to violate that principle. This is what it means for something to be a principle in the first place. As Binswanger states it, a principle identifies an action that is required by the facts at hand. To violate a principle is to act as if what is required were not required, a contradiction. The oft-heard excuse, just this once, means it's safe to accept just this one contradiction. But accepting a contradiction undercuts the whole structure of one's knowledge. It forces a puzzle piece into a space it does not fit, spoiling the overall picture and leaving no place to put the right piece. Thus, for Dave to maintain that libertarians ought not insist that it is always wrong to violate the NEP, he must either prove that intellectual dishonesty is a virtue, or he must disprove the NEP, and show that those people should therefore not be libertarians in the first place. I have already intimated that intellectual dishonesty is a vice, but allow me to explicate that point further. Intellectual dishonesty requires that one is attempting to cheat reality for some imagined gain, but this relies on the premise that one's desires, whims, one's conscious action has primacy over existence. But the very opposite is the case. Existence has primacy over consciousness. The alternative is nothing more than a stolen concept fallacy. Consciousness means consciousness of something, of existence. Thus, existence is logically prior to consciousness, and consciousness cannot be the primary. A vice is that which is anti-reality, evasion. Evasion is the active disintegration of concepts, turning one's consciousness away from its objectively proper role in perceiving reality and towards imagining up a fancy world inside one's head. Any endorsement of the primacy of consciousness is necessarily a vice, so intellectual dishonesty is a vice. So much for intellectual dishonesty. Dave's other escape hatch is to disprove the NEP, thus showing that libertarians ought not insist that it is always wrong to violate the NEP, because they shouldn't be libertarians in the first place. On this, I point you towards my argumentum e contrario, which proves the NEP to be true. First, the problem that law tackles is that given the fact of scarcity, conflicts are possible. So how should a man deal with conflicts? There are three possible answers. 1. The law of the jungle, do what thou wilt, might makes right, don't bother with the question, etc. 2. The non-aggression principle, avoid conflicts. And 3. Mixed law, something in between these two. Both the law of the jungle and mixed law are false because both reduce into the primacy of consciousness. Thus their only remaining option, the NEP, must be the true principle of law. In summary, I hold that libertarians ought to bite the bullet and support zero restrictions on public property, and insist that it is always wrong to violate the NEP. We ought bite the bullet because it is both competent debate strategy and a requirement of intellectual honesty, which is a virtue. We ought support zero restrictions on public property because it would destroy the state overnight and lead to a world which is much more compliant with the NEP. And we must insist that it is always wrong to violate the NEP because it is a true principle and dishonesty is a vice.
All right. Thank you, Zulu. Dave, go ahead and give us your opening statement.
Sure. Well, thank you to both of you guys for doing this. I appreciate it. I think let me just start by saying, Zulu, like, I think that I think you're a very good libertarian, and I think that I saw the video. The only video I've watched of yours that was not about me was the one that you had that went viral. Or I don't, not that it's the only one, but it had like 500,000 views, and it was you tearing apart socialism and quoting Ludwig von Mises and all this stuff, and I thought it was really good. And I just wanted, like, you've obviously said some things that I find disrespectful about me that I think are out of line and wrong, but like, I do appreciate that you're a young guy who's spreading these ideas. I think that was like, even just what you put together right there was very impressive. I just see a whole lot of holes in it. And I hope we can talk about that in the show. But I guess my opening would be this. Did either of you, have you guys, you ever seen or read Mozart Was a Red? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's yeah, so it's Murray Rothbard wrote a play about his experience with Ayn Rand, and it's pretty hilarious, at least I thought. And it's one of the things, like, the character that plays Ayn Rand is like, Murray Rothbard comes to her apartment because he had written her a letter saying how great Atlas Shrugged was, and like, he sits down and the Ayn Rand character is like, would you like a cigarette? And he's like, oh, no, thank you, I don't smoke. And she goes, what do you mean you don't smoke? And he's like, and she's like, why not? And he goes, I don't like it, I don't know. And she goes, you allow your subjective whims to dictate your decision making or something. And anyway, he's needling Ayn Rand. And the point is that a lot of people just in the objectivist tradition get into this habit of pretending that very clearly subjective things are objective statements, that they are deducing from first principles and their unified theory of everything when they make a claim like Dave Smith is bad, embarking on a bad strategy, or he's bad for the movement, when that is so clearly, obviously, almost, look, even if any of us have an opinion on what the right strategy is to get from wherever we are now into anarcho-capitalism, it is so obviously not an objective fact what any one strategy is. Who the hell knows? I mean, I likely think it's a better strategy to run Ron Paul people than Gary Johnson people, but I don't even really necessarily know that that's the case. In fact, it could be a bad strategy for us to wake people up to all of this to begin with. Maybe the end result of it is that the state just crushes all of us and people still don't believe in liberty anyway. But yet you can spin these things as if they're objective claims. And I don't think that that's right. Now, I think, so one of the points you made, or something similar to this in your video about communism, I believe, in fact, you started by saying something along the lines of like what a lot of libertarians have said before, like there's this line about how communism works really good on paper, but doesn't work in the real world. And of course, like every libertarian or any person with any conception of like philosophy at all immediately goes like, no, dummy, that's not what that means. If it works on paper, then it works in the real world, right? Like that's the idea of on paper. The idea of theory is that it works in the real world. So what's like a more accurate thing that the communist could say, or that the liberal could say, would be, it sounded good to you in theory, but it doesn't work in practice. And the only reason it sounded good to you in theory is because you missed these 5 or 17 glaring holes that other people have pointed out, and it's not actually good on paper. Well, in the same sense, if when you build something, you know, like I know Zulu and a bunch of people, I think, in his camp took offense to when I said that if I believed libertarian principles led to this, I would simply abandon libertarian principles. Even though I was saying I don't believe libertarian principles lead to this, I was saying if they did, I would abandon it. But I mean, take that to its logical conclusion. If any set of principles that you believed were true, or any theory in like you believed is true, let's say when put into practice, was going to result in all of us dying this instant. Obviously, there's a crazy scenario, but let's say that was the case. Are you saying you wouldn't abandon that theory? Well, the point is that there is a truth to what the fruit of something bears. And that's also an observable truth. And if the fruit of something is obviously a complete disaster that defeats the entire purpose of philosophy to begin with, then clearly the answer isn't, I was right about everything on paper, and then I put it, the answer is, I'm missing something here. And likewise, I would say that I think, like, 99.99999% of all human beings would just understand on some basic level that if this whole debate's about biting the bullets, and of course you're not actually biting any of those bullets exactly in that opening, at least. But if you're really saying the shit I've heard you say, or as I've seen people say that you say, if you're saying essentially that you wouldn't steal a penny to save your mother's life, that there's no human being in your life who you would say like that type of religious devotion to the non-aggression principle, which is what you're talking about there. I mean, that is a fruit that if that's what your theory bears, I think the correct response is to go, I have to go re-examine my theory for such self-evident reasons. Like anybody, it's more that belief, like if taken to its logical conclusion, right? Whatever the Mars, space laser or whatever. So we could draw it down to stealing a penny. And let's just say that, like, for a fact, you knew that the Martian wasn't just going to kill your kid or whatever. They were going to torture them to death. And you're saying you wouldn't steal a penny, or that we should say in that case, you don't steal a penny because that's aggression. That isn't in the realm of a libertarian legal theory anymore. That is in the realm of I mean, maybe the worst version of ideological capture I've ever heard, just religious devotion. And, since you started off with your scripture and we're on a Christian show here, I would say that, Jacob, I'm not like a religious expert, and I have a feeling that there are a lot of religious experts who probably have a pretty good answer to how the thou shall not steal thing doesn't actually mean you got to let your whole family burn before you steal a thing. I think, in fact, in Christianity, there's a whole system of just like apologizing or something like that. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that both in Judaism and Christianity, what you'll find laced all over the place as God's like most central commandment is do not worship anything else except me. Do not make anything else your religion except this. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, because when you make anything else your religion, it's always going to get perverted. So, like, look, you can believe in the non-aggression principle, and you can also be a human being and understand things like, for example, if I were to like, or someone cheating on their wife, I don't think any of us would say is a violation of the non-aggression principle. Shoplifting is. But I don't think any of us would say that like shoplifting is more, or maybe Zulu would, but I don't think anyone else would say that shoplifting is like a worse moral crime than cheating on your wife, right? So like in the same sense, isn't it pretty obvious? Isn't it even pretty common sense to just say that, like, look, I believe in the non-aggression principle. I think it's like a foundational civilizing principle. It is the principle of civilization. And we have civilization to the degree in 99% of cases when we have non-aggression. But there's also a principle that, like, I have to do absolutely anything within my power to protect my children. And that's actually a principle that rises far beyond the non-aggression principle. In the same way that, like, if I got in a fist fight at a bar, it's not the same thing as me like abandoning my wife and kids. Like, it's a much more powerful moral principle, because the world is complicated, man. And actually, like, Ayn Rand did not figure it all out, and she was a genius. But like, the worst part of her was insisting that you have to accept her entire unified theory of everything. Life is complicated. We don't know everything that's going on here, and we can't deduce all of it from first principles in a perfect logical chain. We can deduce some things, and like those are important, and we could get into some of the specifics of what you said here. I'll wrap up. But like, guys, every day at the end of the day, we all have to collapse and hallucinate for like 7 hours and go to like a different zone. And none of us know why exactly that is. There are mysteries about this world. There are things we don't know, but there is something so obviously anti-human, more anti-human than the worst environmentalist, about saying that what we ought to believe is that you should allow your family to be slaughtered before we would steal a penny. And I'm sorry if like you think that's unfair for me to frame that, but like, from what I understand, your challenge to me was, you're too much of a coward to debate me. I will bite all of these bullets in front of you and show you how it's a good debate strategy. And like, I would just say, again, how do you define a good debate strategy? You're trying to persuade the audience to your cause. I would venture to say that biting that bullet is not going to be a great strategy to persuade people. Anyway, happy to get into any of the specifics.
Okay. So now we're going to move into the open kind of dialogue back and forth. I'm going to try to be as quiet as I can be. I'll interject if I feel like maybe I can ask a question that moves what they're talking about along, or if I feel like one person's dominating too much, or if there's just too much crosstalk. But Zulu, maybe do you want to start us off by, do you have like a question or rebuttal, or just something you want to raise to Dave, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. So it seems like you're making this claim that there are these extra theoretical factors that come in and kind of overrule the libertarian property theory in some sort of some cases, like, oh, this is a principle of protecting my family that rises above the NEP, or this principle over here, it rises above the NEP. So do you like, what is the standard for discovering those extra theoretical factors?
Well, it's fun, even in the question there, it's like, look, there's just some, like, in general in life, right? There are some things that are quantifiable, like me and you are like a certain distance from each other right now, and there is a correct answer to that. And there are some things that are not, like measure how much Jacob loves his kids. Like, I don't know. It's not. So I don't know that I'm proposing that. I'm not sitting here and saying, hey, I am the newest philosopher who is making a major addition to libertarianism here, and I have an objective standard over whether these things, like where it can be override. I'm actually much more consistent with the libertarian literature that's been around for a while. There's a whole other element to libertarianism that isn't just the theoretical deductions, which is the enforcement idea, and a lot of libertarian theorists have written about this. Obviously, like, libertarians have always argued for private court systems and private police systems. There would be some system of enforcement, and the truth is that the obvious answer, like the obvious answer to this scenario, right, is, first of all, no, I don't not steal a penny to save my children. I steal $1 million to save my children, and then I guess maybe I go to jail for that, or maybe I try to plead my case in court. So in other words, I don't have an objective standard. I don't know that there is one, but there would be some type of court system where you could plead your case to other people, and they could say, hey, we're talking about extenuating circumstances here. You know what I mean? Like, there's no theory ever, any political theory, that when put into practice, there won't be areas of just like, it's a judgment call, let's use common sense. There could be an example of trespassing, but you didn't put up a sign, and you didn't have a fence, and you didn't say private property, so there was no way for this guy to reasonably know that he was trespassing. That's not exactly consistent with libertarian philosophy, but like, it's a situational. So I don't need to have an objective standard to this to just know that the obvious is true. Steal the money and save your kids or your grandma. Can I ask you a question now, man? Because I honestly almost feel like I'm being trolled with this shit. Like, is your sincere position, like, forget this debate, just like us as dudes, are you like, I understand you're young, you don't have a family of your own yet, I'm guessing, but there's no one in your life that you like love enough? Are you saying there is, like, you'd allow your own mother to be tortured to death before you stole a penny? Is that actually your position?
Yeah, so basically, the way I view reductio ad absurdum, this is just what I think they achieve, is it's saying, hey, is there an exception to your thesis here? Is your principle actually a principle, or is there some exception to it? That's really what they're asking, and it's perfectly valid to say, no, there is no exception to the theory. And so let's take, like, for instance, the Martians are going to blow up the planet. The aliens come in and they're like, hey, you got to steal this penny. Let's imagine this, like, actually literally happening in real life. Okay, well, so then there's this massive interstellar fleet. Must be like a hyper advanced alien race to even have that fleet in the first place. It would probably cost way more resources than have ever been obtained by humanity in the history of humanity to send them here. And their demand is, they come up to me and they say, hey, go steal a penny. So, okay, well, let's imagine that literally happening. First of all, clearly these are highly irrational beings. So the question I would have is, well, how did they even get any of this stuff in the first place? Because you can't get that if you're irrational. So maybe they had this stuff and then they ethically regress or something. Okay. But then if they are this irrational, this heavily irrational, well, then actually I have no way to know that they're going to stick to their word at all. It might as well just be, hey, the Martians come and you've got no way to stop them. It's like, okay, well, then I just have no way to stop them. Because let's imagine this literally.
Yeah, but you
does
hold on.
happen.
First of all, this isn't the question I asked you, and this doesn't sound very bullet biting for that to have been your whole pitch to me here. But like, no,
bullet.
I'm asking. I'm asking a very specific question though, which isn't what you're answering me. I'm saying, do you actually feel that way as a person? Like, is there no one in your life who, if there was this situation where not, and whatever, dude, the point obviously of biting this bullet isn't how likely the scenario is or what the real world logistics of it all are. Just saying there was a scenario where the person you love the most in the world was going to get tortured to death, and you could steal a penny or a dollar to stop it from happening. Like, are you? I thought the whole call was that you will bite that bullet to my face. So, like, are you actually saying you believe that and you would do that with someone you love?
Yes, I believe it would be immoral to steal a penny or rape a baby or any other aggression. I believe that would be immoral. Yes.
No, that's not my question. I asked, would you do it? I'm asking, would. I mean, my question is so clear. Would you? You'd let?
I don't think you should do that.
So you'd allow the person you love the most to be tortured to death before you stole a dollar so that you could be committed to your philosophical principle of it always being wrong to steal a dollar, so that you would have a coherent worldview.
Yes.
So
let me
could
go into
feel
why.
good about your own coherent worldview, you'd allow the person you love the most in the world to be tortured to death. That's the position that you want to debate here. And you don't see how maybe someone could think you're just a religious zealot. This is insane.
If you're positing that it's aggression, that I've got to commit aggression, then yes, I would not nuke Ohio in order to save.
Dude, I don't dislike you enough. Despite the shit you've said about me, I don't dislike you enough to believe that you're telling the truth, dude. Like, I just don't want to believe that, because it is, dude, there is just something so fascinating to me, man, about, and this is, I know it hurt all of you guys' feelings, and maybe fairly so. Like, maybe I was wrong. Look, I really do genuinely want to try to be as good faith and charitable in this debate as I can. I'm not here to like try to fucking destroy you or anything like that. Dude, I think honestly, my feeling with this shit, like, I don't know if you saw this, Jacob. The other day, I just gave Alex Berenson a lot of credit and sent a bunch of fucking people. I just sent like fucking hundreds of thousands of people to Alex Berenson's goddamn Substack. Even though he's called me a Holocaust denier, you know, and he's been totally shitty to me, but just because, God damn it, he just broke the story that Moderna covered up a kid that died in the trials of the COVID jab. This is like such an insane story. So what, you know, at the end of the day, you got to care more about the thing that actually matters here, which are the issues we care about, than our own egos. And like, so Zulu, like, I look at you, I go, dude, you reached 500,000 people breaking down the price calculation problem of socialism, and I bet there's a whole bunch of people you reached who I can't reach, you know, in that group who you're talking to. And like, that's amazing, dude. I want you to be successful in this. I want you to do as much as you can. So I'm not like trying to own you here, but look, there is something about the people, like, I know you guys got upset that I said you're worse than communists. I don't know. Maybe that wasn't the right way to say it. I've been thrust into this position where I'm like the libertarian who's on like all these big shows. I don't know if I always do a perfect job representing us. I try my best. I think I do pretty good. But like, can you understand the worse than communism thing? Like the point I'm making here as you say this right now, like, and it really is, this is why I said it's anti-human, like an environmentalist. Like, don't you just understand that, like, that is the core of humanity, like just the decency in every single person, the natural instinct that you're going against here. Like, you can never claim that this is part of the natural order in any meaningful sense. This is the idea. We are all so hardwired on the deepest level to know that we would die for the people that we love, that we would protect them. That's the best of civilization. It's the best of masculinity. Like the idea that we're supposed to accept that because you want to stay consistent in your worldview, you allow the people closest to you to meet their demise in the worst, most grueling way.
Specifically because you're positing it has to be aggression for the reduction, right? That's what I'm saying. So
yeah.
Again.
But the aggression was the slightest aggression.
Well,
let me finish.
Let's have Zulu respond.
Sure. Because you posit it has to be aggression. So you're positing it has to be aggression, and then you're saying, okay, well, I guess the NEP fails here. But let's say it's a bank teller and a person holds a gun to their head and says, hey, go empty the cash register for me. You could look at that and say, oh, that's definitely aggression for the teller to be stealing this money and giving it to this thief. But also, maybe that's not aggression, right? Is that aggression? I think the person who's holding the gun is the one actually committing the aggression there. So that's why I was trying to analyze the Martian scenario. And like another thing is, if this literally did happen, the aliens came, I posit that there are 0 people on planet Earth who I could steal a penny from. I think that nobody would reject me taking that penny. So then it's actually not possible for me to steal a penny. So then the scenario is just the Martians come in,
but there are,
and they're going to blow
okay,
Earth,
but
and there's
there
nothing
are,
you can do about it.
yeah,
So
but
that,
this is
then,
now
yeah,
you're
there's
not
nothing to
you're
do.
not biting bullets, but now you're not biting bullets, you're just copping
I
out.
am.
Like, okay, so I could come out with another scenario where, like, I don't know, yeah, like your kid's gonna die of starvation, and there's a house with food inside of it that is unattended. You can break in and steal it. Okay, so like, I don't know, like, forget like a very real world situation that could theoretically happen. I mean, I just, whatever it is, I mean, I guess to some degree you bit the bullet saying it before, but forget all this other stuff. We're not having a conversation about like how it actually would go down when the Martians are coming. It's just the point that, like, obviously the reason you use these reductio absurdums and the reason you go into these areas is because, look, you can say, I understand the desire that you guys, I kind of was more like this in my 20s too. Like there is something like, there's something about libertarian ideas that are so beautiful, and there's something that's so intoxicating about having like this irrefutable, totally complete, unified theory of everything. And so you're basically going like, look, if I concede this, then I don't have this principle 100%, and then your whole unified thing isn't there. But like, the point is that, as with every moral principle, there are times where there are conflicting principles and there are lots of things going on, and it doesn't really cancel it out. Like, it doesn't cancel out the non-aggression principle to say that I would commit aggression in some acts. And in fact, I can still say that I believe that ought to be the legal order. But it's just like, yeah, obviously there are some scenarios where actually morality being more complicated than anything that you just like deduced from libertarian literature, there's other moral issues that are more important that might outweigh it. I think it's an immature thing to deny.
Let me ask a clarifying question here to Zulu, see if we can dig into this more. Zulu, can you understand why a father would value their child's life more than a penny or $1 or heck, even $1 million? Right? Like, can you understand?
I understand why they think that. Like, I'm not retarded, right? I understand why they think that. I'm saying that the proper way to deal with this isn't to go, oh, I guess principles are useless. It's to go in and analyze, okay, well, can I figure out some NEP compliant solution here? That's the point.
Sure.
And the thing is, if you get to the situation where you're like stealing food in order to feed your children, I posit that this is like a ethical cold open. It's like, how did we get here? Well, you get there, you get into that sort of deep poverty by not following principles. Indeed, you said it earlier that the world is complicated. Yes, it is complicated. And the way you deal with that complexity is to act on principle. And you don't end up in situations where you're just this bumbling moron who's now, I've got to be a parasite on society. I've got to steal all this food in order to feed my children. You don't get there.
I mean, again, this is what I'm saying. You state things that are like generally kind of true as if you're saying an objective fact. It's not an objective fact that the people who are impoverished are there because they weren't living by principles. Yeah, generally speaking, living by principles gives you a better shot at succeeding in life, but also there's just outside acts that happen to people. I mean, what libertarian doesn't know that? How many people have been living reasonably decent lives and have just been crushed by the state? So like, no, it's not true. It's like, again, you're biting these absurd bullets and trying to rationalize backward from that to keep your theory together. But fundamentally, don't we see how backward that is? And by the way, I think you're flirting with a bit of a straw man here. I'm certainly not. Jacob, in every our conversation, has never said therefore abandon principles. That's not the point. It's therefore understand that there are complicated factors and there are areas where there are competing principles. And then also understanding how to deal with the situation we're actually in, which is always, like, I'm really not much into these debates these days. That's what I tend to focus on more.
if there are competing principles, let's look at what that actually means. That means there's a contradiction in your moral theory. So like, are contradictions true? Because you're saying that they're competing, that this thing is, it doesn't negate the NEP, but it actually does, because now you're in mixed law. You're saying it's proper to aggress sometimes. So unless you're just going to accept that contradictions can be true.
No. See, this is I'm not in mixed law at all. Again, you've got this completely wrong. I never said that the law should be that you're allowed to punch a dude in the face if he comes up and calls your wife a slut in front of you. I'm saying it's not immoral. And if someone comes up and says that to my wife, I'm going to punch him in his fucking face. Like, I'm saying, then if the cops are called, I kind of expect to be arrested and put in jail. You know what I mean? Like that. I'm not changing what I think the legal system ought to be. That's nothing to do with the argument at all. I'm saying the thing about it is like, if I was going to get prosecuted for stealing money to save my kid's life, like, okay, I'll go serve my time, whatever. Like that is the best legal order. I think libertarianism is the best legal order for reasons, which we could, get into or whatever. But it's not immoral. This morality is a much bigger thing than just our legal theory, which is all libertarianism is.
What is the literal question that you think that law is answering then? Because I hold that law is a subset of ethics. I think it's answering what you should do with respect to conflicts. What do you think it is answering? If you think you can have a virtuous crime?
Well, essentially, what law is answering, I guess, is how force is to be regulated in a given area. I mean, the law is answering, or how force is used without consequences or something like that. But no, of course there can be crimes that could be moral. I mean, like, again, there's extenuating circumstances. This is the reason that we believe in courts and juries and judges and due process of some sorts. This is like, I don't know. Yeah, like there are situationals that you have to look at. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. I just think it's actually more honest, and I think that helps you win debates and persuade people more.
Hold on. So if you're saying that law is just how force is used without consequences, well, then that's just purely in the realm of, okay, well, the state is able to do this without consequences. That is what the law says on this matter. I don't think this is a particularly convincing theory of law. This is called legal positivism. So do you, to just be clear, do you endorse legal positivism then?
Well, I'm just saying, like, I think objectively what the law is what, like, an opinion with a gun. It's the rule of when force will be used against you. I don't know what do you think is wrong about that?
But then, so is libertarianism not making any ethical claim? Is it just saying, well, we think that, what is libertarianism saying then? Is it saying what the law should be? Is that your view?
Yeah, I think libertarianism is a legal theory. Yeah, I think that's right. And yes, obviously, like you are correct to a degree that it's like a subset of ethics. I don't disagree with you on that. We're looking essentially, I think I would say libertarianism is the only legal theory that does not institutionalize conflict. So it's the only legal theory where, like, down to basic, like, if the law is self-ownership and non-aggression and private property rights, then it's possible for there to not be conflict. There still can be, but it's possible for there to not. But if the legal theory is anything else, you're institutionalizing conflict. So I don't know if that answers your question.
So then if there is this sense in which libertarianism is holding, maybe legal positivism can be fine, whatever. We don't necessarily have to go down that road. But then it is saying what you should be doing. Libertarianism is indeed saying, well, this is how you should operate as far as the law is concerned. But then is libertarianism not claiming that it is indeed immoral to, like, punch the guy in the face because he said something rude to your wife?
Well, look, again, like, these things, I don't think that they're absolutes. And I think, like, again, like, there's exceptions to every rule. So yes, in a sense, libertarianism is saying that, yes, you can't do that. That again, it's the same point that I made before. The thing is just that, like, libertarianism is saying it's immoral to steal, sure. But then there's a situation where there's just a higher moral calling that is very obvious. It is so self-evident. It's again, it is as self-evident as saying that if you put your theory into practice, all of us would die this instant. Then you shouldn't put your theory into practice. It's as self-evident as that.
Let me ask a question here that I think will help maybe both of you understand each other better. So to Dave, you've advocated for peaceful parenting, which I think maps onto libertarianism quite well. They have kind of like a shared premise that if you take initiating force against a peaceful person, and in peaceful parenting, we're talking about children, off the table, and people go, well, then how are you going to discipline your children? Or, or how are you going to run society? And we go, well, when you take force off the table, you kind of open up human innovation to suddenly come up with creative ways to not only solve problems, but prevent sort of conflicts and problems from arising. I think part of what Zulu's trying to say here is that when you find yourselves in a situation where you're presented with this moral dilemma, you're sort of saying like you haven't taken the proper steps to prevent yourself from getting into that situation. And he's sort of, I think, saying in a sort of libertarian sense, if you have the position, no, in that position, it's still immoral, it's still wrong, and I shouldn't steal the penny. You're then going to live your life in a way, according to that principle, where you're not going to put yourself in that position.
Okay,
so,
if you've lived your life without principle, and it's all your own fault, everything about the situation you're in is your own fault, and you've been a really horrible person and had no principles, right? Or even imagine like you did really, really horrible things. You know what? I'll even say you murdered people. You've killed several people, okay? And then you allow your own children to be tortured to death before you steal a penny. The worst thing you ever did in your life was allow your own children to be tortured to death. It's a much graver moral crime to allow your own child to be tortured to death when you could have saved them so easily with the tiniest little infringement on the non-aggression principle or whatever. Like, it's just I don't know. It's
well,
like
but can you see a
worse
risk
than murdering somebody?
Can you at least recognize? I think what I'm trying to get at is that like I think Zulu is wary about a risk in what you're saying, which I'm kind of sympathetic to. But the risk is that we're going to open up a sort of.
All right, sorry.
We're going to open up a sort of. I'm trying to be a moderator here. Okay, give me a break.
Okay. No. Sorry.
Yeah. A risk where people are going to say, well, because I can just sort of plead for mercy and because there's these conflicts, I'm not going to take personal responsibility to sort of avoid putting myself in these situations we're describing in these reductios. So that's my understanding of his critique, which, even though I understand where you're coming from on it, I think he has a valid point. That's why I brought up the peaceful parenting thing, because it reminds me of that sort of, it's the I actually got this from Stefan Molyneux, which is that prevention is always better than cure, and I think we would all generally agree with that.
I mean, I'm not agreeing that people ought to do everything they can to not put themselves in really bad situations. I mean, so I don't exactly get the question, but yeah, no, it's different than the peaceful parenting thing, because you're not just talking about taking options off the table. I mean, it's also true that there are really really bad people who are quite successful, and really good people who are in dire, horrible situations through no fault of their own. That is also true.
And so I just want to get back at this line of questioning that I had, namely that you're positing some sort of an exception to the libertarian theory that, okay, well, now it's fine to punch this guy, and this is why we have courts and stuff. Well, I mean, then what is the standard used for like the judge to evaluate that? It's like, okay, yeah, this is an extenuating circumstance. Like, is this not just a clear contradiction? Like, how does the judge rule on that without just going, okay, yeah, no, there's just a contradiction. It's fine to punch the guy, and it's not fine to punch the guy. Like, how do you evaluate that? How do you untangle that contradiction?
I mean, the thing about it is, again, as I said before, I'm not presenting that I'm a philosopher who's come to some new libertarian conclusion here. I think this is already kind of handled in the libertarian literature, and I don't see that this really isn't a major problem, except for people who just have this like desire for everything to fit into an objective, unified theory of everything. The standards already are like, well, Did I just, oh, sorry. Did you just make me big or did I lose you guys? Sorry. No, I mean, like, I don't know, like probably a lot of the standards that are even used in government courts today, as crappy as they are somewhat reasonable. You get a group of, you know, like even like, I don't know exactly how it would work in a free society. I would say a lot better, almost certainly, but like even a jury of your peers is not like the worst system ever. You get regular people there, you explain the situation to them, and they have, you know, I think libertarians have always supported like jury nullification when it comes to bad laws, right? So why wouldn't we also support jury nullification for just situations where it's, I don't know, obvious? And again, like the thing is, you're asking for like an objective standard here. I'm the first one to say I don't have one, but even if you haven't come up with the objective standard, it can still be obvious that there needs to be some type of standard. And again, like I said before, within reason is a fine answer for these situations. Like, I don't know, dude, if Cain Velasquez, you guys know that story where he like, he was a UFC heavyweight champion and this guy was molesting his daughter like for like over a year and he found out. And he like went berserk and like, I don't know. I think he tried to kill the guy or something. I don't think he killed him, but he tried to. But like in a situation like that, like, would I on a jury take that into account? Would I treat that as the exact same, you know what I mean? Like aggression as someone who just went and did that to someone? No, of course I would take that into account. That seems obvious.
I do want to clarify, like if somebody is abusing a child over an extended period of time, then the retribution is indeed to abuse them very heavily back, perhaps even up to the point of death. But because they might just die from their injuries, right? But so I just want to hammer in on something. You said that you don't indeed have this unified theory for how to solve these things. Okay, but then what does it mean for a theory to not be unified? It means that there exists contradictions in it. Like, is that not just what that means? Because it's not unified. Well, it's not internally consistent. That's what that means.
Well, I mean, I think what it means is that life is really complicated and there are complicated situations. And like I said before, there are competing moral principles. And like, yeah, so if you want to say, does that mean that it's a contradiction? I don't know. I mean, I guess what it means is that strictly speaking, it's not a universal moral principle, but you could still say it is the best legal theory, and this is what the law ought to be. And I think there's lots of reasons you could say that. Again, I think that I appreciate the desire to fit everything into a unified theory. I just don't think that you or anyone else has ever really done that and ever really come up with it. And again, I think that there should be, like, obviously I'm not coming out against like like I love Austrian economics. I obviously agree that there are things that we can like a priori deduce, and that we can know things from thinking about them logically. But at the same time, we're also operating with our human brain, which is not perfect. And if you do, like, I think people confuse this with like, again, it's black and white, like you're a consequentialist if you say this now. But if your theory produces a result like that, like I have to allow my children to get tortured to death right now over a tiny infraction, then the proper response is to save your children's life and go, maybe I didn't think it through well enough. Maybe there's something else to this.
Yeah. Okay. So you said there that, well, nobody has really come up with this unified objective theory in this case. Well, then I believe that I have, because like I have my proof of the NEP. I have formulated what the NEP is saying, given that proof. So like, which premise is false there? I don't see the false premise.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the false premise would be thinking you can universalize this in every moral interaction. I mean, look, again, like I said before, again, like this is back to my point about, look, every libertarian theorist ever, every genius, brilliant libertarian thinker that we've ever had, I mean, no, okay, that maybe this is an overstatement, but just about all of them, Mises, Rothbard, like Hoppe, they've all dealt with the consequentialist critiques of libertarianism. right? Like now I'm not saying that they were consequentialists themselves, but they've all at least at some point addressed the fact that, people say if libertarianism was implemented, it would all be a disaster. But let me demonstrate to you how actually it wouldn't be a disaster and it would work out really well. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have moral principles, but it does at least imply that they recognize that you do got to deal with the argument of what are the consequences of this. Because like I said, taken to its logical conclusion, if the consequence of implementing a theory, even if you thought it was universally proved, if the consequence was we all die immediately, then obviously that's bad theory, right? Like just like the socialism on paper in practice. If it leads to all of us dying instantly, well, why is that proof that it was bad theory? Because what's the point of philosophy to begin with? To understand the world, to understand what's true and moral and what is the good life and all of this, to understand how to think. Well, we can't do any of that if we're all dead, right? So obviously you've got like a flawed theory here somehow. And I don't have to pick it apart and find where the flaw is. I can simply say, if it results in all of us dying, you're wrong. And so likewise, I can say, if it results in you have to watch your children get tortured to death when you could have stopped it, your theory is wrong.
Well, if I may, Zulu, there's a super chat here, which I think kind of pushes what you're trying to push. This came from August Leo 8368, $50 super chat. Thank you for that. So Dave, if your greatest value is to preserve your child's life, then why is it not okay to enslave a doctor in order to ensure they are forever healthy, or to force others to protect them on pain of death? Why shouldn't we engage in might makes right?
Well, again, because all of these, I understand that look, man, you can say like, hey, we have to be philosophically consistent. And I understand the desire people have. There's also things like binary thinking, what psychologists call splitting, where things are always either black or white, or they're all, so yes, obviously, this is the point of being a libertarian. I'm not saying that any of these things should be institutionalized or any of these things should be the law of the land. We're talking about moral claims in extreme extenuating circumstances. So like, why is it not okay for me to enslave a doctor to take care of my kids all, throughout their life to keep them healthy? Well, like, I don't know, I'm not in an extenuating circumstance or anything like that. And I have very reasonable other options. But I don't know if you ever saw like the movie Johnny Q, or there's the movie, it's a Denzel Washington movie. And the idea is this kid, it's a 90s cheesy drama thriller. But like the idea is this kid needs open heart surgery. I also had a kid who had open heart surgery, so I kind of have a soft spot for the movie. But right. He goes, they won't. His insurance cuts him off. Probably had some awful anti-capitalist message in there or something like that. But the idea is he gets a gun, he puts it to the doctor's head, and he makes him give him an open heart transplant right in front of him or whatever. And like, yeah, in that situation, like, no, he wasn't the bad guy in that. I don't know. Like everybody who watched the movie, every human being who watched that movie, libertarian autists, I love you, but maybe not you guys, but every other one who watched that was rooting for that guy. And so again, like to say this is just another way of saying, yeah, Dave, but you can't universalize your extenuating circumstances. Right. That's why they're extenuating circumstances. Right, life is complicated. So, there are exceptions to things.
But then you are, so on the one hand, you're saying you're rejecting the theory practice dichotomy, that if it works in theory, then it does indeed work in reality. But then you've got to contend with the theory on some level, because otherwise it's just, oh well, I based on my common sense, which just means the philosophical status quo. That's what that means. It's just I feel like this is probably the case, but yeah, I haven't actually got a theory for it.
Well, no, it doesn't exactly mean that. That's not exactly what it means.
What is common sense?
I mean, it could be something that is deeply kind of written into the souls of all human beings. It doesn't have to just be what the status quo is. And in fact, maybe to some degree, the status quo is influenced by the nature of human beings. If we're talking about the example of allowing your kids to be tortured to death, I don't think that that's something that's just like some top-down status quo or something like that. But I get your point. I get that you go, hey, but like, how do we know exactly when it is a situation, how do we know exactly when it is a situation where it's okay to say that it is moral to there's a more important competing principle, and how do we know when that's not the situation? And I understand you have a frustration that like, hey, it just kind of sounds like it's at your whims or whatever, but like in the same sense that like, let's say in a libertarian society, issues like the age of the driver's license, let's say, or something like that, right? Like, how old should you be when you're allowed to drive a car? And what is the argument? What is your theory for how that works? What is your theory for what age that? How can you prove from objective reality, with the starting premise that a reality is objective? How do you prove whether you should have to be 17 or 18 before you drive a car? And the answer is like, well, hold on one second. Let me just say, you cannot actually have a theory or an answer to that and still go, well, obviously a 7-year-old can't drive a car, and obviously a 35-year-old has to be allowed to drive a car. So, in the same sense, maybe I don't have the perfect standard for it, but I can sure as hell tell you that there's a situation where you steal a penny to save your kid's life.
Yeah, so I reject that. I think that you actually can answer this with the theory. This is based on the theory of guardianship within libertarianism. So the answer is, it's not a universal age. It depends upon the person. Namely, is that person a child in this respect? Are they able to communicate their will in this respect? Are they able to understand what exactly is occurring here? And that's going to be answered on the individual level. So someone with like severe Down syndrome, well, they might take a lot longer to get there than someone who doesn't have such learning disabilities. That's the answer. That is the objective answer.
But that's not a theory of anything. That's just saying it's different for different people. Like, yeah, of course. But then at the same time, you have to come up with some type of.
Well, no, I think Dave's point is that there's not an objective standard, like it's this age. You're describing a standard that's more of a process.
I think that's an invalid question. I think it's an invalid question to ask, what is the specific age? Just as it's like an invalid question of which races should be allowed to purchase firearms. I think that's an invalid question.
I didn't really ask the question. I just said that you kind of have to pick some type of law based on that, and there's no objective answer deduced from pure first principles. That's all. And even your answer there, it's really not, though. I mean, it's just too vague and nothingness. Like, well, I don't know, dude. Like, it's on an individual level, you could tell when the person's ready. Okay, but like that's not a rule that a property owner can enforce on a road or something like that. And so they're going to have to come up with some type of rule for, right? I mean, isn't that in anarcho-capitalist societies, the property owner would be deciding what the rules on the road are? I'm imagining there would be some. You are driving big, fast, metal machines around that can hurt people. So, like, again, whatever. I think the point that I'm making is pretty clear. Maybe there's not an objective age here, but you could damn sure say there's an age that's young enough and an age that's too young and an age that's obviously old enough. That's the obvious point here.
My point is, I gave the standard. I said it depends on whether they're able to communicate their will with respect to this thing. That is the objective standard. I don't
communicate their will with respect to this thing. What does that mean?
So basically, for a baby, they have some sort of will, but we have no way of knowing that will. That's why it's all right if your baby's about to crawl off a window to just pull them back, because they have some will. We don't know what that will is. They can't communicate the will. They can't say, listen, Father, I would like to kill myself right now by jumping out that window. We can't know that. And by the way, the same standard applies to the man who's passed out in the snow. He might want to die in that snow, but we have no way of knowing that because he's passed out. And that's why it's fine for a paramedic to come along, take guardianship over him, and move him into a hospital to, fix him up.
Yeah, what type of standard is that, man? I got a 4-year-old. He lets me know all the time that it is his will to do something that I'm not going to let him do, and I still use force over him. Literally earlier today, he stood up in the bathtub and started jumping, and I grabbed him, and he said, "Let go of me." And I said, "No, I cannot let go of you right now." He was very clear on what his will was. That's a nice story if you don't have kids, man. But when you got him, you got a real incomplete theory on your hands there.
I'm asserting that this isn't actually communicating his will. He's just kind of speaking. He doesn't understand what is going on.
Again, this is what you guys always do. You claim you have this perfect unified theory, but then it just becomes a circular nothingness. Oh, so now, right, that's not real selfishness. That's not really his will. Let me tell you something. I know my son a lot better than you do. It was his will that I let go of him. It absolutely was. He would have, if I had let go of him, he would have gladly continued jumping until he fell over and cracked his head. He's a wild little boy. It was absolutely his will. This is just, again, your standard fell apart, and so you retreat to, that's not real capitalism, or that's not real socialism, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's not really his will. Sorry, that's not good.
Is the claim that your son knew that this would indeed lead to him cracking his head open, and he knew what that implied. He knew everything about this, because I reject that.
Oh, there's a whole different thing between saying that you have a will and saying that you understand all the ramifications of everything that will happen as a result of you following your decisions. I'm not sure that any of the three of us understand every ramification that might follow, but what you laid out was their will, and he clearly has one. Like, I don't know.
And I'm saying to properly actually be communicating your will on some subject, you have to actually understand what that decision entails. What does that decision mean? It's not just enough to take
but
the
again,
decision.
It's like how you objectivists defend the selfishness. It's like, this means nothing if you just change the definition to not. So like, I prove an exception to your thing, and then you go, no, that doesn't count because that's not really selfishness. That's not really his will. Okay, little kids have wills. They absolutely have wills. Yeah, they don't have all the same information that. Okay.
Well,
I mean, what do you mean by that? I'm not saying they should have like control. Obviously, I'm arguing that I should be able to hold, but your standard for driving was that they have a will. I don't know. What does that mean? You said a baby doesn't have a will. The reason you can pull a bit, but you said the ability to communicate that. Okay, but then I used your standard on my little boy in the bathtub. He had the ability to communicate that. So that standard fails.
He doesn't actually understand what that decision means. It's effectively
so then why'd you say the ability? So don't say the ability to communicate that.
So is the standard...
Because he's not like, so for instance, let's say I got hit in the head really bad, and I just there's these diseases you can get in your brain where you just start saying words and it's not actually communicating any intention to do anything. So if it just so happened that I got hit in the head such a way where it's like, I want to walk off this cliff right now, but you can see my eyes are going all buggy, like you can see that I just got hit in the head, like I'm not actually saying those words, I'm effectively just babbling.
Right, but my son was not just babbling. He very specifically wanted to do a thing. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he was going to do that. He wasn't just hit in the head. Like it's just not. It's apples to oranges. But I don't know. We could move. We don't have to make this whole debate about whether or not I should I'm immoral. I should have let my son crack his head and then be tortured to death by Martians.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of curious about your standard, Zulu, because it seems like your standard implies something to the effect of like they have to understand, like they have to be able to communicate their will and also have an understanding of what the consequences of that action was.
Yeah,
but
like
then
let's interrogate this. Yeah, okay, sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
Well, yeah, but that just seems like that would even apply to adults who could just say, well, I didn't know that was going to happen. And then said, who gets to be the judge on what knowledge is reasonable and not reasonable to know ahead of time before you take any particular action? I mean, this sounds, I'm not saying you're saying this, Zulu, but this sounds awfully a lot like the sort of like in the Me Too movement, when you had all these women basically claiming they got sexually assaulted or raped because, like, well, they consented, but they didn't really consent because they didn't know exactly what was going to happen to all. So, like, you know, that seems to me, unless you have a better way of defining it, like a really slippery slope to like, we're suddenly opening kind of Pandora's box to kind of be like the standard is, you know, there needs to be a clear sort of like, if it's based upon your ability to know the risks of something, then like, you know, who's deciding what that knowledge level is?
So again, this is what the field of psychology is for, right? And child development. You have to have the capacity to actually understand what a decision means in order to communicate your will to do that decision. If you don't know what that decision means, you just can't communicate that you want to make that decision, right? So for like a case of an adult, if they're just being epistemically negligent, well, then they are capable of understanding what this decision means. So they are able to communicate their will on this subject. But I don't think that for a child, and by the way, the way I define child is in the legal sense, it's someone who's not able to communicate their will. So this would also apply to, you know, biological adults who, like, you know, you see this all the time where it's someone who's like so mentally whacked out of their mind that they just go around and they're just like a beast. And it's like, yeah, indeed, we just got to like control this person and remove them from the situation.
Yeah, but again, like I think, see, the thing about this is, right, and I feel like this is the case. It's like all you guys in your camp, it's like you dogpile on me about where I'm not perfectly consistent in my theory, and like even just before, it's like, well, what's my limiting principle on when it's okay to violate the non-aggression principle or of that. But then when we get into this, like, I go, okay, so you're the theory guy here, and your theory is coming down to when they communicate their will. Okay, well, it's not when they communicate their will, it's when they communicate their will and they know they know all of the ramifications. But then of course,
that's what
no
that
one
means.
really knows.
That's what I'm saying.
Right, but no one really knows all of the ramifications. And so obviously this whole thing, right, it's a spectrum. And to just say this is what the field of psychology is for is like, that's a cop-out. You don't have anything then. Like the thing is that you're going to have to cut it off somewhere, right? And on a certain end, there are going to be some people who are like, I don't know, not super aware of everything, but kind of aware of some things. And you know what I'm saying? Like, there's obviously going to be an area where you're going to have to make a judgment call. So essentially what I'm saying is you're really, when you boil this thing down, right back to where I am on theory. At some point, even a psychologist, by the way, is making a judgment call. It's not objective to say like exactly whether somebody understands all the ramifications of their actions or not. Does any 17-year-old understand the ramifications of all their actions?
The judgment call here isn't whether or not we want to apply the NEP in this situation. That is absolute, that is inviolable. Okay, the judgment call is you have to actually scientifically investigate whether this person is indeed capable of communicating their will on this thing. That's where the scientific investigation comes in. That's where we leave the realm that I deal with, which is law. That law has already answered the question, is already given the objective standard. Now it's up to scientists to try and apply that standard to some particular case in front of them. I can't answer.
But you didn't. What your objective standard was just okay. But I don't think you've given an objective standard there at all. But okay.
Well, let's move on from that. I did want to go back to something that a couple things that came up earlier. So I'll ask this one first. Zulu, in your opening remark, you talked about. You said that basically Dave is strawmanning your and the other people's position who are saying that there should be zero restrictions on public property, because the way you're defining that means that would include schools and the state or whoever's controlling the schools that includes not forcing kids on it. But every time Dave brought this up, it was in the context of not this like abstract, what you're advocating for is, I mean, essentially what you're just defining privatization at that point. You're just saying, we just don't think they should do anything with the property and stop owning it. But Dave's question was always, what do we do right now? Because, and obviously this relates to the immigration thing, but before we even get to that, if we have time, that's not really the focus of this debate, but it's part of the resolution. And I don't think we've talked about it too much here, is this sort of like, yeah, I think Dave and me and you all agree the ANCAP position is, what should the state do with public property? It should have never created public property in the first place. And now that it has, it should, cease to exist, and it should become, first come, first serve, or sold, and, maybe money repaid to the taxpayers, like Alex Nowasta said. But until we get that, Dave is saying, well, isn't it reasonable? Like, are you going to go to parents and say, sorry, my theory says that the school gets to force your children to be there, but while it's doing that, you don't get to, okay, well.
My theory doesn't say that it's fine for the state to force your children to go there. That's precisely why, I accepted this resolution, which is support zero restrictions on public property. Because I don't hold that I have to accept that there should be some restrictions, namely forcing people to stay there, and then remove other. I don't have any dog in that fight. All right, my claim is there should be zero restrictions, and that's what the resolution says. I indeed bite the bullet that there should be zero restrictions on public property. So I'm confused.
Okay, but obviously that obviously is a cop out of the larger conversation. But okay, fine. I mean, like, look, the whole point.
That's your resolution.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's obvious, just avoiding the issue there. But like, yes, the whole context of this conversation, as everybody involved knows, is that we're not talking about a situation where we are abolishing all public property and privatizing the United States of America. None of us have like a debate about that. The point is that there are a lot of libertarians who are saying all things being given, open borders would be better. And I'm just saying, like, don't, even if you're going to say like all restrictions include the courthouses and all of that, but are you actually going to say that, like, what, I don't know, we should just, people should be allowed to sleep on the highways, people should be allowed to shoot heroin outside of schools or whatever? I mean, like, there's just like, there's obvious implications that are problems even with yours. But the idea is that if you're saying open borders are okay, but like government still controls the land, then obviously in the scenario I was talking about was being like, oh, well, okay, we have a public school that is functioning as a government school. Would it be better if there were zero restrictions on who was allowed in? So like, if you're going to bite the bullet, bite the bullet. If you're not going to bite the bullet and say, oh no, I'm only saying that, like, oh, because the state capitol will be toppled or something like that, that therefore it'll make up for that. But that was the topic of debate that you did a video on, that you, I don't know, like, obviously.
It's not even that I'll make up for it. And again, you know, back in that original video, the moral case for open borders, what I describe in that video is the homeless person is in fact homesteading the park. I think that they own that park at that point, or at least some section of the park, and then it's subject to free market, right? That was always my point throughout this entire thing. You know, I don't care what anybody else said on it, where they wanted to keep some restrictions but peel off others. That has never been my point.
So the homeless man who just walks into a park that an entire community of people have been forced to pay for, and he just sits down there and takes a shit on the swings and shoots up next to them. It's his. That was him mixing his labor with the land, not the people who have been systematically robbed by the government, not the normal families who are just sitting there trying to use it for at least what its purpose was, not the taxpayer. That's who the libertarians have to stick up for, is the homeless junkie.
So it depends. Again, this is where we have to come up with an NEP compliant solution here, right? We can't just throw our arms up and go, well, I guess the NEP doesn't work anymore. So what would be an NEP?
No one's doing that, dude. No one's doing that.
Hold on. So what would be the actual NEP compliant solution here? Well, somebody can come along whilst the state's still there and declare guardianship. They can publicly say, hey, I'm declaring guardianship over this given public possession, and I'm going to try and maintain it. And when the state goes away, I'm gonna step in and I'm gonna homestead it, and I'm gonna, you know, make sure that it's gonna, you know, be used for restitution or whatever. That would be the NEP.
Good way to be unalive.
So that is one possibility, dude. That is one possibility. The other is like a cop could go beat it, get out of here.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like a good way to get unalived to me.
Mine seems slightly more realistic and slightly more like within the realm of what could actually happen maybe tomorrow, and not just like a multi-general, you know, like effort that we believe is theoretically sound in our heads. Like I just, you know, I don't know. This stuff just gets into goofy territory, man. And like, there just is, this really is where there is just a difference between living in theory in your head and living in reality, and going like, we could, yes, but there's another solution that has this one added benefit of might actually fucking possibly happen, that could happen right now under the current paradigm. And if you want to say, well, hey, you're not being pure to your principle in 100% of situations, no matter how ridiculous it is. I mean, honestly, dude, it's just like, yeah, but you'd let your mom get tortured in front of you. So like, yes, that's true. In that situation, I'm fine with the cop telling the guy to leave. Don't let old men into public schools. That's actually the correct answer as of right now.
Okay, again, so the cop telling the guy to leave and not, you know, homestead this property, not get in there. Well, that's equivalent to someone, a border agent, sitting on the border and saying, no, you're not allowed in here, right? But if you're going to take the reduction against me, it would include that the cop shouldn't tell the guy to go away. The cop shouldn't do that. It should be open to homesteading. And again, that's what I've always defended.
I'm sorry. Can you just restate that? I don't think I followed you on that. Could you just...
So you're saying the more likely scenario, you know, in a situation where someone's a guardian, they're trying to declare themselves as a guardian of this public park or whatever, and they're saying, hey, I'm going to try and, you know, homestead this thing when I'm able to. Okay. But then you're saying, well, the more likely thing there is the cop just tells this guy to piss off. Okay, well, that's actually equivalent to someone sitting on the border and saying, you know, no, you're not allowed in here, Jose, or whatever. Okay, but then if you're taking the reduction against me, which is the open border stance, I'm also claiming that the cops shouldn't tell this guy to go away. He should allow this guardian to come in and homestead this park and, sell it off to somebody else and try and, get this back into the market here. That's what I'm claiming. And that's what I've always claimed.
Well, Zulu, but you do realize that there's kind of a barrier. Like, yeah, I think we're all open to like, what can we do either now or in the future to start privatizing public property? But I think Dave's point is always like,
the difference is just that we're living in real life, not in theory. I mean,
well,
that's honestly the difference. Is that you're coming up with a solution that is completely far-fetched and unrealistic, cannot possibly happen in real life because you want it to be consistent with your theory. I understand that that's what drives you to the point that you will take the most.
What about that guardian doing? What about the guardian doing that is impossible?
Because obviously we live in anarcho-tyranny and the police force would not look. The reality of the situation we live in, whether libertarians like it or not, okay, is that the state can crush any of us. All of us only have anything because the state allows us to have it. Like they could come with overwhelming force and destroy any of us if they wanted to. That actually is objectivism, if you want to really know what's objective. What is objective is that there's men with guns who rule over us and they make the decisions. There's no, in a scenario in a modern city today, nobody is coming and claiming ownership over some private park, some public park. The cops would shut that down in a second. The point is that the government's put us in a position, like the same thing with the border, where they control the thing and then decide when to enforce the rules and when not to, and not in a coherent or sane manner. And so that would never happen. The cops would shut you down immediately. But here in real life, all over major cities throughout the United States of America, those same cops that would not let you do that are also allowing homeless junkies to lay down under a slide. And it's a real problem. And so forgive me if I'm more concerned with solving real problems in the real world than making sure that you don't ever feel like you contradict yourself.
Well, again, contradictions are false. And by the way, this thing of, we live in a narco-tyranny, so we're not going to privatize it. It's like, okay, great. Yeah, I know. Right. And that's why I'm advocating that we be able to privatize these things. And if I don't advocate that, well, then we're never going to get there. Right. It's just never going to happen unless somebody's out here advocating that these things should be privatized.
Yeah. See, I think this
reply, by the way, to also the Hoppian solution, like the syndicalist approach of how you privatize public property. Right. That we don't live under the world where we're able to do that. It's like, okay, well, yeah, great. Duh.
Right. Okay. But so then what it really comes down to is that you're saying, well, all we got to do between now and then is say, privatize it, privatize it, privatize it. I just don't think that's right. I think that, right. Okay, fine. But like, look, man, I'll just say, and dude, honestly, man, I wish you all the best in your career. And I hope you reach millions and millions of people with the great stuff that I think you have to say about economics and even a lot of the philosophical stuff. I've watched over the years, like I've been a libertarian for 20 years or so, a little less than that now. And I remember like before I was even like on the scene, before I was even podcasting, there were these guys who were kind of like big, what you might call celebritarians or whatever. And they were, like Adam Kokesh had a show on RT. Larkin Rose had made a bunch of like YouTube videos that had like blown up at the time. Even when I started podcasting, I mean, those guys were way ahead of me. They had started before and had big audiences way before I had an audience. And I watched those guys I'm not saying this to like take a shot at either of them. I got nothing against either of them, but like I just watched them like fade into irrelevance, like just not move the needle at all. Like just it's like that, and then go and just like lose debates really badly. And because they were taking just crazy positions that are just totally untenable, that are going to get everyone to go, this is just absurd. And I don't think that that's the correct method. I do think that like there's a balance. And I think that like, if there was anything, like if I'm trying to be as charitable as possible, like I thought you got a lot of shit wrong in the video that you made about me. I mean, like almost everything that I saw, I thought you got wrong. But like there was one point I saw where you were talking about how like, look, like when Ron Paul, you know, is asked about immigration, he at least like pivots back to this vision of a free society, and where Dave is like always just trying to prove that he's not a goofy open border libertarian on this issue. I'm like, I think there's a reasonable criticism of me in that. I don't like, you know, it is possible that like there's a balance, and maybe I haven't struck the balance perfectly. I've been very open talking about how I don't think I've talked about economics enough on the big shows I've been on. But like there's a balance. Yeah, you want to talk about like the vision for a free society. You want to talk about the fact that we want to move in that direction. You want to get as many people reading Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises as possible. I humbly say I've been doing pretty good in that department as far as people in our society go. But I also think that you're just going to be much more relevant, taken much more seriously, and move the needle much more in our actual huge opportunity that we have in the culture right now. If your immediate solution for things isn't like, you know, yeah, we just have to have no government restrictions on anything. And even though we all know on some level this would lead to like an unmitigated disaster tomorrow, we have to support that anyway because privatize it. I just disagree with your subjective strategy on that.
Again, what it means to have no government restrictions on things is, yeah, indeed, that would be, this is like the point with the Austrian business cycle theory, that if there's been all this malinvestment, we're in like this big boom period, right? When that gets cut off, we enter a bust, and it is, you know, it's bad, but you got to go through that bust. The bust is the good part, right? So yeah, if the government tomorrow, Trump calls me up and is like, hello, LiquidZulu, I've been loving the content, you know, and he's like, hey, what, tell me all the policies you want me to implement right now. And, you know, I managed to achieve Ancapistan. Every state in the entire world immediately collapsed. Yeah, there'd be a lot of bad things which would happen, but that's the bust period. We've been in this infini boom for the past like several millennia now. So yeah, there's going to be a hell of a bust which comes up, but we got to go through that bust. You got to have the bust in order to actually get back to rational allocation.
Again, it's stated as if it's an objective claim, but no, a business cycle and an entire society are different things. And allowing homeless junkies into elementary school is not cleansing malinvestment from an economy. Those are just very different things. And in fact,
what is the
allowing a homeless junkie into a girl's bathroom is actually just completely an unnecessary step in a transition from here to Ancapistan. It's not the necessary correction after a bunch of malinvestment. In fact, you could just have an orderly solution. Like, I mean, I don't know. There's a million different scenarios, and we're not going to Ancapistan tomorrow. And like, frankly, these debates just like really are not the thing that interest me. But I don't know. There's just never been a serious, reasonable libertarian who ever had that proposal as how we unwind the state. Maybe you privatize it. Maybe there's an auction. Maybe there's some type of like shares given out to the community. Maybe you hand it over to a board of the parents. But in the meantime, you don't let homeless junkies in, man. I mean, like, it's just, this is not, I don't know. This is just too goofy, man. I swear to God, I thought I was being trolled by your whole inquiry here, that you're going to bite the bullets and that this is going to like destroy me in a debate or something, man. But like, well, it just doesn't logically follow that you need that step at all. And like, look, dude, there are, again, like I said before, there are complicated factors going on here. Like, it just got alleged by Stephen Miller. Now, I don't know exactly if this is true, but he may not be making this up. But he said that they've found like all the documents, and that the Biden administration specifically requested for millions of migrants to be brought in to the country, which again, like, really doesn't seem that far-fetched. We already know there's a lot of UN money, a lot of NGO money was going into that shit. So like, okay, yeah, in perfect libertarian theory, like the government's not supposed to do nothing to no one, and we're supposed to have private property, but we don't have any of that. We have this situation right now. Is it so obvious to a libertarian that like it's once that happens, right? Let's just say that story's true. Either way, the story's basically true. A government intentionally brings millions of people into a country. They pay for it with the money they stole from the domestic population or destroying their currency or whatever. They bring in a foreign population that would not have otherwise been here. Okay. Now they are in because of state action. Is it such an obvious conclusion that from the libertarian perspective, it's better off to leave them here than remove them back to where they were? I actually think this falls into the range of like life's more complicated than that. And actually, you know, like there are these conflicting times where like one act, nothing else following after that, does more of a thing than one act and then an act that undid that last thing. And so in the same sense, the government owning a public street and deciding that homeless junkies are allowed to shoot up on the street is like a different thing. Like then there's just as reasonable a case that we know they wouldn't do this privately. We should support this not being the status quo.
Yeah, but
So
he
did say a few things there. I just want to quickly, say what I would say on those things. So as far as like, a homeless junkie who's like erratic and this guy's like a crazy person or whatever, having him around children, it's absolutely proper to grab this guy and throw him out of society. That's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Isn't that a violation of the non-aggression principle?
No, I don't think it is, because I think if you've got this like person throwing their machete around and they're running at children.
No, we're not throwing a machete around. Just make it a homeless junkie who's got feces all over him and is like clearly on drugs and just a clearly unstable looking person. Is it okay to grab him and throw him out?
Yeah, what it means to say this person is unstable is that he is a risk to my children. He is threatening my children. So
no. Hold on. Well, no. Because let's be real precise here with this. I'm sorry. I'm just going to push you on this now. So no, a risk and threatening are not the same thing. Like a threat is something like I'm going to hurt your child. A risk is like I just looked at this guy, eyed him up. I'm working on probability now. He might not do anything. He hasn't threatened anybody. But so how is it not an act of aggression to grab that guy and throw him out just because he's I thought it was likely going to lead to aggression.
Yeah, so the way I'm envisioning this scenario is that you've got this sort of maniac of a person, right? We've all seen the videos of like, these people on like public transport or whatever, and then suddenly they just start stabbing someone, right? That's why we don't want them around children, is because we think they're a threat, right? That's the reason why you don't want them there. So, and as far as the business cycle point,
no, wait, hold on. That's not an answer to my question, man. So that you think they're a threat? I mean, like, what are you basing this on? I mean, like black people disproportionately commit a lot of crime. Can we just go based off of they're black? So now I can initiate violence against them. How is this not a violation of the non-aggression principle that you're supporting right now?
So no, I'm not saying remove any black person from school. Again, what I'm saying is,
but what's your criteria? They look like a threat. You perceive them as a threat.
It's not just that they look like a threat. It's that the objective they are a threat. That's what I was assuming the scenario was. Are you saying that this person is no threat to children? You 100% no. He's just
no. I'm not claiming. No. I'm not claiming you 100%. No, I'm talking about like just a guy who's a homeless junkie who wants to go into the elementary school and sit in the girls' changing room. Like, yes, I mean, so in my scenario, we don't know. Obviously, there's a very high probability, and obviously, if done in large enough numbers, real children are going to be injured. They are going to be brutalized as a result of this. We know that in large numbers. We don't know in the individual case. This isn't a standard for saying you can initiate force from libertarian theory.
So again, the way we look at these scenarios, right? What do you think of when you think homeless junkie entering a girl's restroom? Well, you're thinking that guy's trying to hurt children. That's at least
but you're thinking that isn't. But you're thinking that isn't the libertarian standard. I could be thinking you're a threat to me right now. What type of objective standard?
What objectively is the case when someone is breaking into?
Yeah, but you don't know. No, you don't know if it's objectively the case. You guys you can't just pretend everything's objective. I described the scenario very clearly. It's a homeless guy, looks erratic, clearly doesn't belong in a bathroom with children, but you don't objectively know that he's a threat. He might not be. There sure seems to be a high probability that he is, though.
That's what it means for someone to be erratic, right? That's what erratic means.
Okay. Again, I described it very clearly. So I don't understand how you're not abandoning the non-aggression principle here. You can just decide that he's a threat and then remove him. I don't know, dude. Like, where do we start? You're willing to bite the bullet to let your own mom get tortured to death, dude. Just let the homeless guy into the kid's bathroom. I mean, what's worse than that bullet, man? Just bite this one. And then okay, we can stand on that. You're the perfect guy who's worked out all of the theory. And I'm just a guy who has like some libertarian tendencies, but isn't a real libertarian according according to you, but your perfect theory is I have to allow my kids to get tortured to death before I steal a penny. Like, okay, I'm fine with not being in whatever your definition group is. But like, again, like, to sit here and say, you're sitting here and saying that like I straw manned your guys' position. I mean, dude, like, you edited up videos of me to make it look like I was saying the exact opposite thing of what I was saying. You played a clip, you edited up a video to make it look like I was threatening some woman or I was inciting violence against her. I mean, I don't think I'm straw manning here. I think you challenged me to this bite the bullet debate. I'm sitting here asking you to bite the bullet and you're avoiding it.
So again, I'm perfectly fine biting the bullet that you shouldn't ever commit aggression. I just want to say, like, I have gone over the deceptive editing claims. I went over that in my response to your guys' response. So it's not necessarily good to rehash that here. Obviously, we're limited.
Well,
on
I mean,
time.
yeah, you took the part out where I was making it a hypothetical and sure made it sound like I was talking about the people who I was just talking about. If you listen to the full version, nobody comes away, including those two who I guarantee watched it. Nobody comes away with the impression that I was calling for violence against anyone. But when you watch your edited video, it kind of does sound like I am. Like, come on, dude.
Again, I never made any claims of that sort. I was using that.
I know.
I was using that as evidence for my claim that this is like kind of your inflammatory rhetoric around the border. That was what I said in the video. Right. I said that.
And then you just sat there. Right. Yeah, I understand. You didn't directly say it. You just let everybody else say it and then went, I didn't edit the video. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay.
So, like, in what way wasn't I doing that?
In the way where you took out the part where it made it clearly a hypothetical, where I'm just talking about, I mean, look, for anybody who doesn't know, essentially what I said was, oh, I call these guys as bad as a commie or a Nazi. And like, yeah, I mean that. They are as bad as a commie or a Nazi. And when you're advocating that homeless people be allowed around, like your children, like, my God, I'm not in a situation like that. But like, imagine I was a guy making 20 grand a year. And imagine my wife had to work and I couldn't afford for her to stay home. And imagine I had to send my kids to public school because there's truancy laws. And then you were like somebody who's advocating and putting my kids in harm's danger. Like, I was like, man, I would murder over. It's me. I have the anti-theory of you. I would murder to protect my kids. I would die to protect my kids. But when you cut out the part where it goes, oh, if I was in this scenario where I make $30,000 a year, and if I was in this, and if I was in a completely different hypothetical situation, and a different hypothetical person was saying this thing, you cut that part out and just leave me going, I said these guys are as bad as commies and Nazis. Then back to, I would kill over some things. And saying you're as bad as a commie is the least of what you'd have to deal with. Yes, when you cut the entire hypothetical part out, it sure does look like I was saying something different than I was. Again, thousands of people watching that watched that show when it happened 2 years ago. Not one person was retarded enough to think that I was calling for violence against the wife of some libertarian guy. I mean, anyway, whatever.
No, I think we should move off of that point for now. That's been talked about enough. I want to move to the audience super chats and questions in a minute, but I did have a couple things I wanted to pose to both of you. So, Zulu, you are saying that you, and I know because I've talked to you, that obviously you don't want the state, importing millions of people. That's obviously also not, that's just the way you don't want the public school to, we all want privatization. We've been over that. Do you not see that there is, I guess it's kind of a question goes both ways, but do you not see that there's a big difference between like your hypothetical and the one that Dave was originally asking, which was just getting at, like, while we're still waiting for privatization to be feasible in the here and now, get enough people on board where we can actually do it, there's nothing that is like a anti-libertarian, inconsistent libertarian take to be like, saying you're okay with the state keeping, the kids that the state has kidnapped. Well, they should not do that. They should not force kids to go there. But it would be a double aggression to be like, and now we have these kids here, and we're going to allow these other dangerous people to be coming in as well. So that was Dave's entire point. And I feel like that was the premise of, like, when Dave's saying, should we support restrictions on public property. It's not the like, is that the it's not even like a libertarian position. It's more like just like, I know you don't like the word pragmatically. Practically speaking, right now, what should be libertarian? What like I feel like you're always doing this thing where you're and I get it. You're a natural law theorist. You focus on the theory, but people are going to ask reasonable questions of like, especially if you're saying, well, I don't know. Hopefully this makes sense. Like I feel like you're never addressing the here and now and like, what do we do in the interim, right? Like similarly, like I don't think you would say if someone said, hey, we want to abolish taxation, but right now the best I can do is, cut it by 50%. Like you wouldn't be some like weird absolutist saying like, no, it's all or nothing, so, anyway, what do you have to say to that?
So as far as evaluating policy proposals, I accept Mises and Pavkovich's regression theorem. Nikola Pavkovich, he presented this on Fabian Liberty's stream. So basically the idea is you look at which way the arrow is pointing with any given policy. You go, okay, well, this policy, is it built on the premise that government can solve problems? Because we all agree there are many problems out there, right? There are many specific scarcities which impede the acquisition of your values. And the question is this policy built on the premise that government can solve these problems? Now, I'm saying with the bordertarian point, they're pointing to all these problems with immigration. And their claim is that the government can solve that. Now, if you take that principle seriously, well, that same principle can be used to justify any further interventions into the economy, right? And specifically, we know that those interventions, that any given intervention into the economy will indeed generate more problems, right? That's, everybody knows that. And so then those further problems that are created by this first intervention, well, you can just as easily justify intervening to stop that. So the correct way to evaluate a given policy, as far as libertarians are concerned, is if the policy isn't built on the premise that government can solve problems, if it's in fact built on the premise that government can't solve problems, then it's a justified policy. So if the 50% tax cut was built on the premise that, well, we want the government to make the maximum revenue and we believe in the Laffer curve or whatever, that would be a bad policy by libertarian standards. The way we should advocate for that tax cut, and this would be a good policy, is if it's built on the premise that, well, taxation is theft and government can't solve problems. So we need to try and cut taxation as much as possible. And maybe you can only cut 50% at the moment. Maybe that's all you can get the votes for. But it's still a good policy by libertarian standards because it regresses into total anarcho-capitalism. Because if you keep recursively applying that premise that government can't solve problems, eventually you end up in anarchism.
Well, okay, well then I would just respond quickly and say my premise is that the state shouldn't kidnap children and aggress upon them. And from that premise, I would say, and they shouldn't do a double aggression where they kidnap them and then put them in danger. Like, I just think that that does follow the same kind of logic you're playing. But Dave, I also want to put something to you because I'm on your side when it comes to this like public property thing. But do you not see that there's kind of a big this, because on the immigration front, I think there's a big jump from allowing a local government to enforce the boundary of a school and to keep homeless people and drug addicts out of it versus what it takes to, because listen, everything you said about the consequences of like open migration and in this like Biden policy to let in millions of people, like, yeah, that's bad. And obviously that's going to lead to like negative consequences. And I think Zulu, you even agree that that's, not something you necessarily think is good, even though you don't think that we can use government to solve it. But isn't it it's a much bigger ask to be like, what it takes, the amount of show of force and centralization and tax revenue and money printing that it takes to get the force required to expel those people then is a much bigger ask than just a school keeping homeless people out of it.
Oh, you're talking about like mass deportations or something like
that?
Right,
yeah, mass deportations and stuff like
okay,
that.
so sure. No question. No question about that, right? And so I'm certainly happy to concede that, like, yes, mass deportations is a whole different dynamic, and there's lots of different potential infringements on liberty and costs to all of that. So that's something where, like, the devil really is in the details. I'm just making the point that, like, look, if we're just talking about it from theory, which I guess is what this debate is about, it's like the government did move all of these people in here, either in effect or literally did do that. And so that does create a little bit of a problem for libertarians and how we might view these things. But just like in response to, some of the stuff Zulu's saying, like, it's kind of like I said on your show, Jacob, like the older I get, the more certain I get about a narrower set of ideas, and the more humble I get about a much broader set of ideas. And like all this speaking about strategy as if it's like some objectively superior strategy, I don't know. I see a lot of holes in this stuff. The truth is, I think it's one of the things that Rand really failed on, that I see, like one of the things she just got so wrong. Was me and Michael Malice, who loves Ayn Rand, but we always joke about this and make fun of her, that she, in the after the 1964 election, she said that the reason why Barry Goldwater didn't win the presidential election was because he didn't fully embrace objectivism and have like a perfect, moral foundation, and therefore that allowed him to be it's just so removed from reality. It's just like an assertion based on no evidence at all. I mean, he was the most philosophically consistent candidate. LBJ had no coherent worldview at all. And so you're just kind of chasing the conclusion that you want. And so the idea that what really moves people or what really wins the day is the problem is that if you endorse, let's say, not having a wide open border, then people will think that you endorse the state solving some type of problem, and therefore they will think that the state can solve other economic problems. And this isn't really how people are moved. Actually, it's just us libertarians and some other people out there, a very small group of people who actually even care about philosophy at all. And the fact that people contradict themselves all over the place. There are all types of leftists who might be good on marijuana. They don't necessarily, carry through. They don't have logical consistency, and they don't even think about that. And the truth is that I think that if you're making really compelling libertarian arguments on war and money and guns and, government spending and government corruption and whatever else, but then you also don't adopt the insane policy that we ought to open the borders immediately and let tens of millions of people flood this country and ruin the whole thing, or you don't take the position that you ought to let your kids get tortured to death before you steal $1, I think you're actually much more likely to persuade people on all of these other correct, important libertarian ideas, and much less likely to be dismissed as an out-of-touch kook who cares more about having a perfectly consistent theory in their head than actually seeing improvements in real life.
So just real quick, can I jump in on this? So
Yeah.
You're saying there that people aren't moved by philosophy. I reject
No, I'm
that
not making a
completely.
black and white. I'm not making a black and white statement like that. Again, that's not. I know you want to turn everything I say into this splitting, like you said, all or nothing. I didn't say people aren't moved by philosophy. I was saying that rigorous philosophical consistency is actually not the main mover of people.
Okay, so not the main mover. So it is at least one of the movers. Okay, that's fine.
Sure.
So I hold that philosophy is indeed the main mover. It is the fundamental, which gives you any sort of society at any point in history. I think the fundamental question is, well, what is the philosophy of the day? Because even those people who aren't philosophically inclined, they still have a philosophy, right? It's just that their philosophy isn't explicit; it's implicit. And whatever that implicit philosophy is, that's what the philosophy of the day is. And that still is driving them, because that's the most fundamental beliefs any person can have is their philosophy.
Okay, so then yes. Okay, so then again, this just becomes circular logic. Okay, so then if we're defining philosophy as how every single human being thinks, then yeah, it has a huge impact on how every single person thinks. The point I'm making is that being philosophically consistent is not what animates most people. And even if you're describing their anti-philosophy as philosophy, well, it sure is inconsistent as hell.
Right. So I'm not saying that being philosophically consistent is what motivates every person, or even the majority of people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that whatever their philosophy is, implicit or explicit, is going to be the thing that is most fundamentally driving them. Because anything else, they're way remote conclusions about whatever they should do.
If you describe philosophy, if you define philosophy as the thing that is the major driver of people, then yes, it is true that philosophy is the major driver of people. Yes.
No, I'm defining philosophy as the most fundamental, the broadest abstractions that one can make, the most fundamental beliefs that are possible to have. And I'm saying that these distant decisions that they're making way up there, those are actually, they come from whatever philosophy they have, right? Because those are not fundamental decisions. I'm not saying that philosophy is defined as the set of things which drive you. That I'm saying that I'm later concluding that philosophy does indeed drive you.
You're saying everyone has a hierarchy of values, which you could another way of describing a implicit philosophy, and some people are thinking about those things, and some people are just driven by what the culture or other forces are acting upon them to.
It's just all whatever. This is all totally irrelevant to the point that I was making. But yes, sure, people's hierarchies of values affect the way they act. I agree with that. I'm saying that being philosophically consistent is not what moves people for the most part, and there's absolutely no evidence to demonstrate that it is.
Well, no, I'm moreover saying that.
Well, by the way, I'm not saying like within reason that can't, obviously, like to a large degree. That's what I try to do. Like there is something about like presenting that like I have consistent principles on this issue, but like if I just mean taken to the extreme of saying I have this principle that governments can solve no problem, therefore homeless junkies all over the street and open borders and wreck the whole country, is not going to have people go, oh, okay, so therefore we have to be consistent and not intervene in the economy or something like that. I just don't think this isn't fundamentally how human beings are moved.
All right. Well, let's we're running short on time. And
honestly,
I do want to get
like, look, the real, like, just very quickly, the real answer to that almost though is just like agree to disagree, and you keep doing it your way, and I'll keep doing it my way, and we'll both try to reach people and see which one moves the needle more. You know, I mean,
yeah. Well, let's get through some of these super chats, and Zulu, you can try to work in some of the things you wanted to say into response to some of these. Freeman Die for $5 said Dave knows the literature, but also understands presentation, application, and reality, likability, and prioritizing positions. I would say that last one is at least something I try to consider, because I do think there are some things that like I think war and the economy matter a lot more than what we like. I think public property is obviously important, but like it's not like the number one issue driving the day. People wondering like, I really wonder what the solution to public property is. So
this is kind of related to the point I was trying to bring up. It's about well, we've got to actually apply this in reality. We've got to talk about the issues of the day or whatever it is, right? Rather than just talking about the philosophy. And sort of the conclusion of this philosophical theory of history that I was presenting here is that, well, if the most fundamental thing is indeed the philosophy of the day, it doesn't actually matter about convincing the normies of anything. That's all very remote, right? What is most fundamental is convincing the philosophers, and then everything else is just downstream of that. That's the point I was trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is there something to that, Dave? Because the American Revolution was founded by like people Thomas Paine writing Common Sense and writing pamphlets, and that caused a revolution here. So I think there's something to that.
Well, I'm certainly not arguing that ideas don't matter. None of us would do what we do if ideas mattered. Also, those founding fathers that you're mentioning had wildly conflicting philosophical worldviews. I mean, like, I don't know. So I'm not sure exactly what the point is. Again, I think this like stuff like with all this strategy stuff, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I tend to kind of disagree with Zulu on the fact that like I do think I've always been kind of a Rothbardian, a Ron Paulian in the idea that like I actually think like waking people up, spreading a message, trying to convince as much of the masses as you can should always be the goal. But so I don't know exactly.
But how do you wake those people up? Like I think you wake those people up, for example, by saying, but I think part of what makes the truth persuasive is that you're being consistent. You're like saying, hey, conservative, you're pro-life. So why aren't you consistent and being pro-life for Palestinian children like you are for, aborted children?
Yeah, I'm not arguing for inconsistencies or contradictions. I'm simply was just commenting on the idea that this is what moves people or this is what wins people over. But regardless of that, it's like there again with these strategies, it's not exactly clear like which one is right. There's like I think there's important insights from elite theory. I think there's important like insights from like the kind of more libertarian populist strategy. you know, is it gonna, this was like, has been a debate as old as time in libertarianism. Hayek had the, you know, you got to win over the academics. Rothbard had the populist message. It's not, none of these are exactly proven correct. Like, to me, it's kind of like, I know what I'm good at doing. I know that I'm getting I'm getting traction off that, and I'm moving the needle on certain topics. So it seems most reasonable for me to keep doing that. But I just wouldn't claim with certainty that, like, it doesn't matter what the masses think. It matters what this group thinks, and they're going to influence everyone else. You know, you could point to a lot of examples, sure, where there's been small. I mean, you use the American Revolution, which is like the best one, but like you could point to a lot of examples of like takeovers of governments by small groups of people, right? But the thing is, that is a little bit different than libertarians trying to do that. Because if we're so bound up by this non-aggression principle thing that we got to let our own grandma get tortured to death in front of us before we steal $1, then how exactly are a small group of us going to recreate that type of takeover? So no, it's not going to be the commie model. It's not going to be that type of shit with libertarians. So I don't know. To me, spreading the message seems to be the best bet.
Fair enough.
So can I just jump in on that real quick?
Yep.
Real quick. So Dave's been kind of, you've been kind of during this debate. I believe you said this several times, that like, well, it's all kind of somewhat subjective, which theory is going to be best here. That there is no objective standard to evaluate the theory. I completely reject that. I don't think it is standardless. Either the theory does indeed work, or it doesn't work. Either the premises of that theory are correct or incorrect. I completely reject that. It's just up to your whim, that there is no way to evaluate different theories. I think you absolutely can. This is what the entire field of strategizing is all about. That's why Rothbard, in his Ethics of Liberty, had an entire section on what is the correct strategy, and he's actually using philosophy there to try and improve his strategy of.
Yeah, he's attempting to, but he doesn't prove that there's an objective strategy. And by the way, Rothbard pursued his strategy, and we live under a much bigger government now than we did under then. So, like, yeah, I don't know.
They're more libertarians.
Yes, people have had takes on strategy, competing views on strategy for a long time. I've long said I think libertarians should be their humblest about strategy, because while libertarians are pretty damn good on theory, we have all failed in our strategies. So that's kind of my feeling.
Well, I would just add to that, there's also the strategy of making us more free. Then there's the strategy of making more libertarians. And so, which is probably a prerequisite to making us more free. I think we've at least cracked part of that second one of making more libertarians. But
look, my whole thing has always just been that I think that I have a knack for what I do, and I've even before I became successful at it, I believed, maybe with a little bit of delusion, like we all have to have sometimes, that like I could be successful at it. And I just thought that, like, if I can just introduce these ideas to as many people as I possibly can, that leaves us in a better situation than not doing that, right? Like, it's kind of hard to argue that that wouldn't be better than not doing that. And so that, and then obviously I just really care about the issues of the day. And I think talking about the major crises that face America that are destroying the country, and then, like the Ron Paul strategy, being right about the major issues, and then having this libertarian thing that grounded all of that, is what really wakes people up.
Fair enough. Let's see. Emily Mower 9902, $5. Thank you. Said, where is Zulu and why does he care about U.S. politics? I don't think it matters where you are in the world. You probably should care about U.S. politics or the world empire.
U.S. politics cares about you.
Yeah. I think I made that point to you last time we talked, Zulu. I was just like, because you were like, well, the Middle East isn't my primary concern because we're not America fighting all these wars. I'm like, yeah, but we've dragged you into wars before. So you kind of have to care. Fountainhead Forum, $5. Thank you. Said, I want to debate about Javier Milei with one of his haters, and Antonella Marty Juan Pin. I'm terrible at the Hispanic name pronunciations. Sorry, Carlos Malasan would be good. Jacob could be the moderator. Yeah, maybe. I have a hard time finding. No offense to my couple left libertarian leaning friends, but like I want to find a right leaning libertarian who's critical of Milei to do that kind of debate, because I just think it'd be more interesting to have two like right-leaning ANCAPs, one who's critical of Malay, one who's supportive of Malay. Because I think that's an interesting. Like,
I know a guy. He lives in Turkey. I don't know if you can get him.
Gotcha. I might ask you about that afterwards. Free men die free. I already read this one, I think. No, I did. Perspective is sorely missing. All of this becomes moot if the dollar in our civilization collapses and we are close. All this theory matters with the existence of civilization and not the fall. No, I think that's a fair point. Like,
yeah, well, that's part of the reason, right? Why I don't like I don't spend my time just in these debates anymore. Like, honestly, like the reason I'm doing this debate here, well, I mean, I guess honestly, like part of it is just that, like, you know, your video generated some buzz, and then like a couple people who I really like said some things about it, and then there was a certain point where like I've had 3 conversations about this, so I guess we should just do the debate. But like I'm debating you because I think it's interesting that you're like I'm always interested in like younger people. Like whenever I'm, you know, if I'm at an event, at a show, then I'm meeting people, I'm always interested when there's like the guys in their 20s who are interested in this stuff. Cause you know, as you get older, you realize we're going to die one day and you guys will still be here. But like, so like I was interested in this debate, and I also think it's kind of like, it's, look, I have been in like thrust into this unique position where I'm going around on all like the biggest shows, and I'm kind of holding the libertarian banner. And if there are like criticisms of me from within the libertarian world, I think like, okay, that's kind of legitimate to talk about and debate about. But that question is exactly why I'm not focused on talking about Ancapistan or libertarian theory or all this stuff all the time. And it really did interest me in my 20s a lot. But like, we just got a real emergency on our hands right now, man. And in the same sense that like you might have some plan of like how you got to redo the foundation of your house because this whole thing is like on a tilt. But when the house is on fire, that really does become secondary, and you want to focus on putting that fire out.
Zulu, anything you want to add?
Sure. So the theory doesn't become moot if the civilization collapses. That's when the theory is most important, right? When you're in these dangerous situations, you really got to know what should I do here, right? If you're just kind of walking around and you're talking about, oh, which flavor of ice cream should I get here? That's when philosophy and theory is at its least urgent. When it's at its most urgent is when everything is collapsing around you. You really got to know what is your philosophy. You've really got to recall that at a moment's notice in order to make the right decisions there. That's why we study philosophy in the first place, is to try and help us out of such terrible scenarios.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a little bit of nuance in that, and like, and you also want to be goddamn sure that you aren't being falsely overconfident or something like that in those scenarios, and thinking that you have an objective philosophical answer to how exactly you're supposed to handle this unprecedented situation. But at the same time, even if you're going to say that theory is the driving thing behind this, I mean, yes, like to some degree, obviously that's true. The reason why the house is on fire, there is a theoretical answer for that, and there is a correct answer of how to put the fire out. The thing is that I'm just narrowing the focus of that and focusing on the fire, and not saying, but also the correct theory includes that the foundation of this house should be fixed. Because like right now, that's just not as important. And it is like, honestly, like it feels like cringy to like have like a minarchist versus anarchist debate in the moment that we're living in today. Not because, again, not making an overbroad generalization of either theory matters or theory doesn't matter, but like, let's just apply theory to the goddamn emergency right now before we apply theory and start talking about 2 options that are just like inconceivable light years away from where we are right now. That's the point.
So I don't have a problem with applying the theory to whatever situation you're in. Obviously, that's what you got to do. You're in this situation. Now you got to know how to act in this situation. What I'm saying is that the theory is the theory is how you parse that out. That's how you figure out what you're supposed to do.
But no
matter what, you're going to have some answer to how should I act in this situation. Either you've worked out that answer previously and you've actually tried to prove what you're saying, or you just haven't, and then it's just your theory is just whim is correct, just whim worship, and that's false. That's definitely wrong.
I mean, obviously, you guys are going to disagree over. Dave thinks there's situations where it's not going to be absolute and it is more subjective. You guys have been back and forth on that, But I'm more interested to ask Zulu, because this has come up a couple times. Like, do you not at least acknowledge that there's all these different issues that our theory applies to? Is there not a hierarchy of like, I think that's kind of Dave's point, is that like whatever disagreements we have and whatever disagreements minarchists and anarchists have, like we agree on the theory when it comes to like the 5 most important issues of the day, which is like war, the collapsing economy, the criminal justice system. I mean, it's just like, it kind of feels like you're not, I don't know. I think if your theory leads you to be like, right now, what I need to do is signal against minarchists. I just think that like, I know it's not an argument to say that that's kind of like goofy and sort of not living in the moment, but like, it's just an observation of like, I think that's what you're doing. Like, I think it is, I think it's actually like suicidal to be like, right now, the most important thing I need to do is,
and there's
make other libertarians my enemy and say they're a poison to the movement when they're correct on the 5 most important issues of the day. And maybe you say Dave's wrong on immigration, but the other 4 issues he's correct on.
There is a division of labor here. I'm fine with people. They want to focus on war. They want to focus on the Fed, whatever. Go ahead and do that. I believe in the division of labor. But there's also a role for someone like me to come in and say, hey, these are big deviations from the theory happening here. And if we don't address this right now, then it's going to just be a rot, which will take over the movement. And I do want to add that it wasn't me who started any of this. I didn't draw first blood here. I wasn't going out and saying, screw these people, I hate these people, and so on and so forth. It was in fact Dave who drew first blood. And I've got a full timeline I went over in my response to your response, which proves that it was in fact Dave who drew first blood against me and my type of people. That's when it started. So it's not my job to then just take these attacks and just accept all these attacks against radical open borders libertarians and then but look, not care about that. I've got to respond at some point.
Look, fair enough, and that is true. I did call you guys worse than communists or something like that, and I said it intentionally provocative. And again, dude, like I said, my mission here isn't to like destroy you or own this debate. You can go do a stream after this and claim you dominated me in this debate or whatever if you think you did. I don't know. I'm just saying that, like, dude, you're telling me you'd let your own children be tortured to death before you stole a penny. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sorry for saying that. That's really like, I think that's really crazy and evil. But let me hold on, because I do want to say something like kind of broader about this, and not just about you. But I think to Jacob's point, it does get to like there is a point where it's really hard to not question the intentions of some people. And I gotta say, and I don't know you well enough, man. But I'm not saying you're like even consciously doing this. But like the point I was getting at before, like it does. Like you remember when Jordan Peterson had the great thing where he said about like, oh, these leftists, these commies, they say they're motivated by their love for the poor, but like let's really observe how they act, and they seem like they're really kind of motivated by hatred, and you know what I mean, and like that's very obvious. And there's obviously this dynamic with libertarians too. We all know it. We're like, man, libertarians just love to pat themselves on the back and talk about how they're the pure libertarian. So like, look, you could say I drew first blood. Like, fair enough, man. This was also years ago, dude. And I guess just like what I was saying with Alex Berenson before, like, I get your point. Fair enough. I've attacked people back after they've attacked me, but there is kind of something to when you got someone like me in the moment that we're living in, who I think even from your perspective, you'd say was like pretty damn great on the last, I don't know, COVID, Ukraine, Gaza, the issues where I've legitimately moved the needle on some of the biggest platforms like in this country. And like when your thing is there to go like, let me make a 3-hour documentary trying to take him out. Yeah, it is kind of reasonable to go like, I don't know, dude. Like if you really care, like I'm sure you can come up with a rationalization of why it is the right thing for you to do, because objectively that I'm a net negative for this movement, even though like there's so like, I don't know, just the fact that the moderator of this debate was introduced to libertarianism by me. Like there's clearly some positives that I add to this. Yeah, I don't know. It's enough to make you kind of question motivations. And I do think that like, I got to say, honestly, dude, when you're saying that you have some, like that you would you would rather preserve your feeling of being 100% consistent rather than save a family member from torture. It does feel to me like you can say all day long that you're motivated by this search for truth and pure theory and philosophy. I don't know, dude. It seems to me like maybe the motivation is a little self-serving.
So I mean, yeah, indeed, I'm an objectivist. I love serving myself, indeed.
Sure.
But I do want to say, like, this kind of dispute, this disagreement, this kind of alienation of the remnant, it was already there under the surface. Somebody had to come along and call it out so that the debate can actually explicitly happen in public. That was the point of this, right? I don't think this ever gets addressed unless I make that video. It had to be addressed, right? So that we can actually
that's a fair enough point. Look, that is a fair enough point. If you want to say, and look, obviously, I know there was a lot of showmanship in the video and in your stuff on Twitter. Like I said on Jacob's show, I found a lot of it funny. Like I get it. So like, look, there's a completely fair point to make that, like, yeah, if you didn't talk so much shit, you probably wouldn't be here right now with me. So like, okay, that's a fair point. Now I would also say, you know, you could go respond however you want. I don't think it's going exactly the way you described it was going to go, but okay. But that's, again, just, we could let the audience decide on that one. But, you know, it, like, that there is a point to that, but it's also kind of like, look, dude, one of the reasons, and this is true, you don't have to believe this or not, you know, like, I'm speculating on your motivations. You don't have to take my word for what my motivations are. But the truth is, dude, and I mean this, I was never intimidated about doing this debate. Nothing against you. I think you're a really smart guy. I'm not like insulting you. I think that the position that you're taking on this shit is just an unwinnable thing to take a position on in a debate. I genuinely, dude, I would love for more people. If I could get 5 million people to see your video on Misesian economics, I would love that. I hesitate to do this debate because I don't want people in public to know. But by me being here, it will for a certainty draw more eyes on this conversation that didn't even know this was going on, and now will think that it's a debatable subject in our movement over whether you should let your own kids be tortured before you steal a penny. And that, to me, just does so much to discredit our entire thing. Like, I just think that's so bad. I had a rule, and Michael Heiss will back this up if you ask you. I had a rule that I used to implement in the Mises Caucus takeover days, that, like, whenever we went on a big show, like if I brought Michael Heiss with me on Tim Pool or something like that, I'd always say the only rule is no talk about libertarian infighting or the loser brigade or anything like that. Don't you ever mention that. Like, Tim Pool does not need to know that we have this goddamn faggot problem in the Libertarian Party. Like, we're trying to sell people on, look how awesome this is. Come join it. So, like, I don't know. That's honestly how I feel about this whole thing. Like, I wish you all the best. I don't hold it against you that you said some insulting things to me. It's fine. But I do think that, like, some of this stuff is goofy shit that it's best for libertarians to shake off.
I'll just add before I go to the next one that Zulu has been very critical, but he's also been one of the few people that even when he's been critical of you and the Mises Caucus, when, like, Ross was freed, he was like one of the most like this is the best thing Libertarian Party's ever done, and was so quick and eager to give credit. And so,
well, yeah, but I appreciate that, but in the same way, like, I saw there was this one libertarian, I won't say his name publicly because I really do actually love him, but there's one libertarian who was, like, really furious with me that I supported Trump and endorsed him in the last election. And then after Trump won, when I launched the Keep Pompeo Out campaign, I got a lot of real influential people behind it. And then Donald Trump put out a letter that said Pompeo and Nikki Haley won't be in the administration. And then I said, great, now that's not enough. Now let's launch the no neocons allowed in the administration at all thing, which, spoiler alert, didn't work. But Donald Trump Jr. quote tweeted it.
Yeah,
and
I remember
went,
that.
I'm on it 100%. Let's do it. And then I remember that same libertarian who was giving me a lot of shit for supporting Trump goes, I was wrong. You were right. This is awesome. Let's keep pushing this. And then I remember, like, months later, him giving me shit again for voting for Trump. And you're like, hey, no, you don't get to do that, dude. You don't get to do that. If you wanted to come around and support this part, well, this part took that part. And so, in a sense, like, I appreciate that you acknowledge that, but I think there's a lot of other shit that we're talking about that, you know, a lot of the other stuff you're critical of, well, that wouldn't have happened without some of that. But can I ask, if you don't mind, could I just ask Zulu one quick question?
Yeah.
Because there was one thing I wanted to ask, was who introduced you to libertarianism?
Initially, it will have been, I went down the road of Stossel, and then I watched some videos by Michael Moreno, and then I was convinced to read a book, Anarcho-Capitalism. Sorry, what was it again? Can't remember the book. It's by Chris Bohr. Something about the ethics of anarcho-capitalism, I think it's called. I was convinced to read that by my friend Idlework, and then that completely convinced me 100%. That was,
well,
I would say that's really when I got convinced by Bohr.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good journey. Could I say, doesn't it, in a sense, if you are the guy who's kind of like figured out these extra steps to like correct, you know, aspects of libertarian philosophy, right? Because like no libertarian philosopher has ever said before that like libertarianism is don't steal $1 to, you know, like stop your kids from being tortured. Like there's no tradition of that. So like if you are this guy who figured all this shit out, but then you're also being crazy critical of me because I'm like, you know, betraying the philosophy or betraying the principles or something like that. But at the same time, you're only here because of John Stossel. Like, doesn't that kind of contradict something about that statement? Because like John Stossel is objectively a less radical libertarian than me. But John Stossel, like, first of all, he's a statist. He's not an anarchist, right? And then, I mean, he had like, dude, he had a whole episode of his show where he praised the U.S. empire. Literally praised the U.S. military as being the only fighting force that fights to liberate other people. And like, yeah, sometimes we get like, so I'm just saying, like, isn't there something there that's like, if you were brought into that, like it would be like Jacob turning around and saying that like, I'm, you know, like a poison on the movement. It'd be like, but I introduced you to it. Like, what, you know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense at all?
So, I mean, Stossel has never been claiming that he's the most consistent libertarian out there, that he's Mr. Libertarian. That he doesn't claim that. He doesn't really even talk about specifically libertarianism a whole lot. He just says, hey, look at this regulation, and isn't that crazy? He's like giving a lot of concretes. That's perfectly fine, because he's not claiming to be Mr. Libertarian. That was my big criticism of you, is that you were claiming to be Mr. Libertarian while saying...
Am I claiming to be Mr. Libertarian? What does that mean?
What does the most consistent motherfucker you know mean?
I mean, it's a pretty tongue-in-cheek, like, thing that I say for years. I don't know, dude. There's
you used that against Ben Shapiro, right? Because Ben Shapiro was saying that you weren't being consistent or whatever. He was attacking you on your consistency. You said, "Oh, Ben Shapiro's learned my name. Now it's time to learn my nickname. I'm the most consistent motherfucker you know, Ben Shapiro." Right?
That,
so you are using this.
Zulu, that's what's known as a joke. I
So
was not making a literal.
You don't think
a literal claim that I'm the most consistent motherfucker alive or whatever? Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, if you want to claim, fine. Okay, Zulu, if you want to claim that because you'd let your mom get tortured to death before you steal a penny, if that makes you more consistent than me, I hereby give you the title. You get it.
There we go.
Go ahead.
Got it.
You got it. That's as close as you can come to claiming a victory out of this. Go ahead. This is just silly. It's obviously tongue-in-cheek when I say most consistent motherfucker ever. I've never presented myself as Mr. Libertarian. Like, this is just like not true at all. I've never like presented myself. In fact, I have like, you know, and I will say there is something that bugs me. And there's not much that I think I've been pretty thick-skinned about this whole thing, but there is something that bugs me about this, because there were a lot of libertarians who I've seen who are really guilty of like oh man, I don't even know if I want to name names here and talk shit. Forget it. But there are libertarians who like got big followings and were popular, and like they present libertarianism as like, I just figured this all out. Like, I just put this whole worldview together myself. I mean, like, and I that always bugged me. I, on the other hand, bend over backward more than anyone I know or can think of to always like make it clear that I'm telling you guys fucking Scott Horton and Bob Murphy and Tom Woods and Ron Paul and all of these, and Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard and Hans Hermann Hoppe are the ones who got it right. These guys got it right. I read them, and I'm telling you they're right about stuff, and I'm telling you you're wrong about stuff. I've never put myself out there as the way you do, which is like kind of weird for you to make this claim about me. I've never said I'm the next great philosopher who has put all of this stuff together, all while having some kind of incoherent positions. But so I just don't think that's true that I put myself out there like that. And if your only piece of evidence is a tongue-in-cheek nickname, I'd say that's extraordinarily weak.
I mean, how am I supposed to take, like, that is just, you've been saying this for years.
Just like a non-autistic way, man. Just like the way to take it is just like in a non-autistic way, I guess. Like a human way.
But then you have to accept that you are indeed being inconsistent. So the criticism still applies, that you're being inconsistent.
Yeah, but I know this gets into this gets into I mean,
this is the point that I think you still can't absorb, and I know you think that it's like because you're so much more philosophically sound than the rest of us, but I actually think it's just because you're a binary, you're caught in a bit of binary thinking and splitting here. But like the whole point from the first half of the debate is that I don't think I'm being inconsistent. Like, it's not that I abandoned believing in the non-aggression principle when I steal a penny so my kids don't get tortured to death. It's that there was something that was a much bigger moral priority to me, like the whole cheating on your wife for shoplifting thing. Like, this was the whole point. So I'm actually being consistent. But whatever. Again, you get the nickname, fine. You got it in your Twitter already.
That's the point, right? Is that you are indeed rejecting the NEP in certain situations.
But he's not. He's saying
no,
it's still
something that overrides
an NEP absolutist. Never rejecting the NEP.
Is it rejecting the NAP to say I acknowledge this is a crime, but I would do it in this emergency because I would rather be a criminal for this small crime compared to letting my child or my father or my parent die?
Jacob, look, this is the obvious answer here, dude. It isn't contradicting the non-aggression principle if you think of libertarian as a legal theory. It is contradicting the non-aggression principle if it's a religion. And that's the difference here, dude. Like, if it's your religion, then sure, it's a contradiction. But libertarianism is not my religion.
You're saying there are some situations where you have an overriding moral principle. That is something which isn't the NEP, comes outside of legal theory, and rules over the NEP in this situation, which means the NEP no longer holds in this case. Right? That's what that means. So you don't actually
kind of no. I mean, that's one. It's one way to put it, and you're kind of forcing it into that language so that you can put it back into your little box that you're trying to keep everything in. Again, I think we've made this point already. It's kind of circular at this point. Like we've just covered this, but like no, I'm not saying exactly that. It's like if you were given some Sophie's Choice type of situation where you know, someone was going to kill both of your kids, and you knew they were going to do it, but they said, you get to pick which one, or they're going to kill one. You get to pick which one. They'll kill both if you don't pick one. If you pick one, it's not exactly saying that like you now are inconsistent in your principle that it's not good to pick one of your kids to be killed. Like it's not a rejection of that. It's that life is fucking complex, man, and there's many different things going on here. Like and then no, I don't think it's as simple as that.
If you did accept as a moral principle that it's bad to pick one of your kids, bad to save one of your kids rather than if you can't save them both. Right? If that is your moral principle, I don't agree with that moral principle, but if that is your moral principle, then yeah, you would indeed be rejecting it in the Sophie's Choice example. That's what it means. Okay. You are indeed rejecting it.
Okay. I think we've just both said all the things we're saying already.
The last thing I'll say in that is that when Dave says that I will then go before the court and plead my case, he's saying the principle applies. He's not rejecting it. Like it's the exact.
If it's a legal theory, if it's a legal theory, you're correct.
Yes. If he's saying it didn't apply, then he'd be like, well, they wouldn't have a right to bring me before a court at all, and it wouldn't be pleading my case. It'd be I did nothing wrong. But he'd be like saying, hey, I know I stole this. Here are the extenuating circumstances. Can you show mercy or give me I'll just pay back what I stole or something like that. Like that's saying the theory applies.
Right. So, but then that means I'm correct that you shouldn't ever commit aggression. That I'm correct about that. Okay. So if I'm not correct about that, then there are cases where you should commit aggression and you didn't do anything wrong.
Okay.
It's one or the
We're
other.
just going to go in circles on this.
They've loved talking about how I'm doing binary thinking, but it is either true or false. Either I'm correct or I'm incorrect about that the NEP is true. Either I'm correct about that or I'm not.
Well, it's true that you should never aggress. But it's
There you
also
go.
true that but it's also true that you might aggress if there's a worse evil on the table. It's
But
a
okay,
worse evil to let my
okay,
child
let's-
die than to
let's just-
steal $1.
Let's just look at the resolution here. It says, and insist that it is always wrong to violate the NEP. That's what I'm saying. You must insist that it is indeed true that it's always wrong to violate the NEP. The resolution says nothing about would you have a breaking point where somebody has tortured you for 5 years straight and you finally you break, right? It's nothing to do with that. The question is, should you insist that it's always wrong to violate the NEP? And I'm maintaining that, and Jacob apparently now agrees. Do you agree with that, Dave?
No, I'd steal $1 to save my children from being tortured.
It's
I don't agree
legally
with
wrong.
you.
So then you do hold that the NEP doesn't always apply. Like the NEP is false.
Yeah, again, like I said, it's not about. No, I don't think the non-aggression principle is false. I think it's obviously a foundational principle to civilized behavior. Again, I feel like we're just repeating all the stuff that we said before. So like, I don't know. It's like you've made your case. I don't know what to say. Like again, I'll just repeat this. If applying your theory means we all die this instant, then the theory ought to be rejected. It's self-evident. If applying your theory, if applying,
rejected because it's wrong, right? You're saying it's wrong. That the NEP is wrong here, right? That's
no. But so would you? Wait, hold on. Would you not, if your theory being applied resulted in all of us dying instantly, would you still want to apply it?
I would definitely check my premises and might go, oh, I made a mistake here for this part of the theory.
Do that.
But then
do
I
that
would,
with
then I
your
would
kids being tortured. Do that with your kids being tortured too, man. Check your premises.
Then I would be honest and say this is false. I wouldn't say no. I think this is true, but I also I don't apply it everywhere.
Yes, you're right, dude. If it's yes, you're right. You're right. It's only you're right. It's not binary thinking at all, Jacob. If you would steal $1 to save your kid from if you would steal $1 to keep your kid from being tortured to death, therefore stealing is okay. And
no, it's still stealing.
Like, this is so ridiculous. This is just so absurd, man. And like the reason why it's not important to even have this debate anymore is because listen, man, I know you got like a little bit of a rabid audience base. I'm assuming they're young. I know you're young. 100% of you guys will grow out of this, dude. I don't know. It just is what it is. Okay. Go. It's only people who don't have kids, only people who don't like, I just don't know, dude.
Multiple of my friends who indeed agree with me here do have children. I'm in group chats with them every day. They're posting pictures of little kids.
If that is the case, if that is the case, and they would actually do that, if that is the case, and they would, like, I'm saying, forget this, you have to have a consistent theory in your head. I'm saying real life. You have friends who have kids who wouldn't steal a penny to stop them from being tortured, dude. Like, what do you want me to say, man? You got some evil friends.
I want you to be honest that you do indeed reject the NEP. I want you to be honest about that. That's all I care about. Because again,
as many times as you want to. I've just answered this. I've answered this to death, man.
The NEP. Okay, fine. If you think so.
Yeah, we're just going on circles.
I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, I don't think either of us are rejecting the NAP. But let's get through the rest of these super chats as quick as we can. Dave, you just said an aggressor who utilizes might makes right is a hero. You are fine with aggression so long as you can justify it. You are a consequentialist and out of yourself as a statist. It's not really a question. So I mean,
it's all just. But again, though, it's all just. It's just so immature and like silly. Like, okay, yes, I mean, like, again, like. If you're saying, just answer the question, it's not again, it's binary thinking. It's not a consequentialist. That, like, it doesn't mean that all you care about is how something works out and you don't care about the morals of it at all. It's saying that, like, if it works out in an unbearable moral disaster, then that needs to be accounted for.
Yeah, accounted for by saying it's false. Right? The binary thinking is the foundation of Aristotelian logic. That's just true or false, no middle.
Okay.
Freeman die, $10. Thank you, said John Q. Denzel was the good guy, even though his actions were not according to libertarian principle. Neither was Killdozer, still the good guy. System forces people into impossible situations. I mean, that's the other messed up thing here I think we're not acknowledging, is that we don't live in this, like, world that is more or less free of, like, institutionalized coercion and just had, like, individuals acting in violent. We live in like this is going from theory to ruled out application, but like, yeah, we live in a society where it's so far from what any of us advocate for to act like there's a perfect way to adhere to the NAP while moving from living under the biggest empire in history to even just going back to our Constitution. Like, there's no, I don't think there's a perfect NAP adhering roadmap to that, or that it's a given that there is, at least. You guys can chime in whenever you want. I'm just going to try to keep reading these through. If the NAP can be violated, then what principle determines when it may be violated, and when should that principle take priority over the NAP? Are we being consistent or not?
I completely agree with that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's been you've stated it like 15 times in the debate, and I feel like we've answered.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know
what. You even said yourself that you can answer when you said yourself you don't have any objective theory for when.
Dude, you can do the post debate. You could do the your post debate breakdown where you claim this was a win for you, dude. Like, okay, whatever. I said what I said. I can't rehash the same ridiculous thing. Right. Yes, I know what I said. It's on record. I don't think you said you would destroy me in this debate, dude. I don't think you've landed a blow. But okay, if you want to say you have, I didn't answer that. It's okay. We're just saying the same thing over and over now. And I do have, Jacob, I got like 10 minutes left. So
yeah, no.
Let's move on to a different thing than the exact same thing we just said.
Yeah. Sean Kennedy, we need more libertarians with life experience and families to relate to average people. I agree with that.
Amen.
Casimir, Killdozer, like Dave Smith, appealed to delusional emotions and called in the feds to aggress against innocent people.
Yes.
Comparison ends.
Yes. Not allowing my children to be tortured to death is just these delusional emotions. I mean, where are these whims?
Yeah. So preventing my adult sister from ending it all makes me morally wrong because she expressed her will. Yeah, no, I've made this point too. Like, I don't care about my brother's self-ownership if he's, whether he's explicitly saying he wants to end his life or I see he's about to do something catastrophic. Yeah, let's take the adultery thing. If I knew that my brother was like drunk or something, or not even drunk, just like mad at his wife, and was about to go do something incredibly stupid, yeah, I might do something drastic, like, I don't know, like tie him to a chair and be like, I'm not going to let you like blow up your family or do something stupid. Like, at that point, yeah, there's things I care about more than non-aggression principle. And I agree with Dave. Like, I think cheating on your spouse or like abandoning your family is way worse than, most aggressions.
Like, would you be fine with a cop doing that? Like enforcing no adultery laws?
No.
Okay, but so then in one sense, it is bad to do that, right? It's bad to be tying your brother to a chair, but then apparently you should do it, which means the NEP doesn't apply.
No, I think that there are different relationships at play there, but we're just going to leave it at that. Idle work, attacks via epistemological boundaries are valid attacks, and libertarianism needs to face it eventually. I agree with that. Freeman die, similar to the law. If I find it tolerable, I didn't need it to begin with. If I find it intolerable, I don't obey. The same for libertarianism. Be careful not to enforce libertarianism like a state. I think that's...
So yeah, the standard is tolerability.
That Dave is willing to accept punishment for the actions he takes needs to be recognized, that he acknowledged that actions are illegal and immoral. That's kind of my entire point, but I feel like that's not being acknowledged.
Well, it was acknowledged for $5 there.
No, there we go. Free men die free. When the dollar collapses, I ain't paying my mortgage. Per libertarian principle, that's theft. But guess what? My survival matters more. I'm keeping it.
I rejected that theft, by the way. I accept, I believe Stephen Kinsella has this view on debt, where it's an aleatory contract. So if the contract goes bad, then it just went bad. Like, tough nuggins.
Yep. Idle work. They agree the NAP says it would be a crime. The question is crime always wrong? If so, the Q becomes, can an act represent both a right and a wrong? Violate NAP, save child. Can the right and wrongs be of different magnitude? Yeah, they can absolutely be of different magnitudes. I think that's kind of like the entire thing Dave and I are saying, is that there's a hierarchy of in your moral system, that like there can be two choices that are both bad and one is just way worse than the other one. and those are the
Then
only choices you have.
Then are you like adopting some sort of like many valued logic here? Because the way Idlework is presenting it here is, well, the question is crime always wrong? Like, are you saying that it can be like 82% wrong versus 16% wrong, and then you have to do some
It's
comparisons?
always wrong, but it's compared to what? It's compared to
Yeah, but
what?
this again, this is like Jacob.
Circle, yeah.
Calculate your love for your kids. What's the number?
Right. No, that's
Like
that's,
I don't know. This
yeah.
is not everything can be
it's
calculated. Like
ordinal.
not
I
not
value my
everything can be
children
like,
at a infinite level, where I value not being a criminal at a high level, but not
yeah.
the same level.
Again,
Yeah,
I think
all
it's
right,
ordinal.
I can't give you an
I
exact
agree.
percentage, but my kids not being tortured to death is way higher than me keeping the title in your mind of being the most consistent motherfucker. I don't know.
Well, I think that it's ordinal, right? I don't think it is a cardinal thing. I agree with the Austrians on that.
Sean Kennedy, who is making the decision to remove these people? Whose private property are you throwing them on? Yeah, we don't have time to necessarily get into that.
An important question for another day.
Important question. Yep. War is bad. MK Rothbard argued that merely possessing nuclear weapons could be a violation of the NAP, regardless of intent to use them. The NAP can be violated with only the implication of aggression.
Yeah, but that's not nearly the same thing as what we were talking about when you're talking about a homeless guy and saying there's a high likelihood that he's a risk. What Rothbard is saying that by the very nature, by the very definition of nuclear weapons, it is impossible to drop a nuclear weapon and hit only the aggressors, right? So it is built into a nuclear weapon that innocent civilians are going to get killed here. So it's just, this is apples to oranges than to just look at someone and say, I have reason to suspect he might be a threat, therefore I can aggress.
Yep. Casimir, Zulu, Dominac, Long, Van Doon, Burns, Kinsella, Hoppe, Rothbard, Aristotle. Contradictions are always false. Dave, Marx, Hegel, Plato, ... Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that literally, if you like, this is a thing you guys are doing that's like just keep it consistent, actually bite the bullets. You guys are so furious at me. I don't know how you're keeping Hoppe, Kinsella, all these guys who agree with me on this issue in there. Rothbard argued in his paleo strategy that, the murky little libertarian issues, like whether there should be pornography on, it should be legal or like things like that, leave it to the states. Just push to like kind of decentralize. Don't, but like, nobody
also said
else
unleash the police and
yeah like nobody. The idea that you put these guys in this category, you're out of your minds. I mean, like all these guys, by the way, all those guys, not the dead ones, but all the guys who are alive, these guys have nothing but great things to say about me. Tom Woods calls me the greatest libertarian spokesman. Kinsella has nothing but nice things to say about me. Hoppe's trying to get me out to his big yearly conference every year, just kind of challenging to get out to Turkey when you got when you're busy. But like, I don't know. This is just ridiculous, you guys. I don't know. This is, if you think Zulu's correct, that's fine. But Zulu is arguing something that no libertarian theorist has ever argued before. No one's ever said that's what libertarianism is. Libertarianism is you have to allow the whole world to be nuked before you steal a penny or something like that. Nobody's ever said. Now, if you think that's correct, fine. My recommendation to you guys, if you think I'm a poison to the movement, whatever move, like, pick a new name, guys. Go start your own thing. That's what I would do if I was outgunned and I thought someone was a poison to the movement. Like, go call it something else, man. That's not what any of us are talking about.
War is bad. MK again said, to be clear, I'm against Rothbard on the nuke issue. My point is, if you were a NAP purist, then homeless people being in a school is by definition a violation of the NAP due to the threat of aggression. I think you kind of already covered that.
Yeah, so it's not exactly the same.
Not exactly the same. Free men die free. Importing millions of people was an act of war. Importing is not the same as an open border. Importing was an act of overthrowing the domestic. I agree with that. I just think that like you're stuck with this problem of like
no question. You're in a rock. You're in between a rock and a yeah. You're in between a rock. I don't know if that's clear, but you're in between a rock and a hard place for sure. But I also do agree with you that like it's not only. I mean, I don't know, an act of war exactly. Like being technical, but it is in some way like the most fundamental betrayal of your own people.
So I just want to say on the importing point, because this has been, made various points like, importing ethnic Russians into Ukraine and so on and so forth. Let me just grant that indeed it is the case that they are importing all these different populations into places for some sort of nefarious goal that they have. Okay, let's grant that that's the case. Well, why not just simply stop the importation? Because if you're asserting that they have closed the border, well then by definition they must have stopped that importation. So it is possible to achieve the goal of stopping the importation, but then so what you're really advocating is for stop the importation and then also erect a border, right? Those are two things there.
I'm not sure I followed that, but yeah, certainly I do appreciate that you acknowledge that they have been imported for nefarious reasons, and yes, I think it's very good that that importation is not continuing at the same record high rates that it was.
SWVY 13, Christian agorism is the only consistent philosophy. None of us are God, and sin, the state only makes compromises. There is no reforming it. Yeah, I mean, agorism only goes so far. Agorism's not going to stop the the military empire that's blowing up brown children across the world with my tax money.
Yeah.
So, Dave, could you steel man the open borders position right now?
Well, let me think. The best open borders position that I could make. I mean, like I could tell you what my position was when I was open borders, but I don't know that it's, you know, obviously I think there's a lot of holes in it. So maybe I could try to improve on that a little bit. I mean, certainly it's easy to steel man Jacob's position that mass deportations could obviously, there is the potential for that cure to be worse than the disease. And there's almost no way. Like what I'll grant probably is the strongest position from my perspective that the open borders people do have is that it is true that there will be some violations. Like there will be people who were like legitimately invited in and weren't going to be a burden on the system or something like that who get excluded. I think that the basic libertarian case for open borders is that you don't want the government to be involved in anything that is initiating violence against people. Now, obviously, my issue is with whether or not it really is initiating violence and things like that. But there's obviously there's a case that can be made for in theory that the free movement of labor and goods maximizes the economy and that, there requires a level of government authoritarianism to enforce borders.
All right. A few more we'll get through here real quick. Sheath underwear saved my life. Thank you, Dave, for introducing me to these life-changing briefs.
They're pretty nice, right?
Yeah, they're pretty good. Let's see. Opportunity cost multilateral nap. I don't know what that means, but thank you for the $2. When it comes to strategy, unless you achieve the result, we will never know if the theory is correct. Then according to Zulu, so this is nonsense. Strategy is entrepreneurial and it is full of uncertainty. I would tend to agree with that statement.
I would say the way you deal with uncertainty always is you have to have principles. That's just another way of saying life is complicated. And the way you deal with complexity isn't by disintegrating and dealing with concretes. You abstract and get abstract principles that you can then apply. That's how you cut through complexity. That's how that's how your reason operates, right? It's by abstracting you get rid of the complexity.
Praxlandy said, if cutting a blade of grass on someone's property would save 1,000 kids from dying, Zulu thinks that cutting the blade of grass is the morally wrong choice.
Not inherently, because it says cutting a blade of grass there. It doesn't say committing an aggression.
Someone else's grass that you don't own, I think is the idea.
Every one of my neighbors around here, I don't even know all of them, but I guarantee you that I ask any single one of them to cut their grass and save 1,000 kids from dying. 100% of them would say yes.
The bullet, buddy. The whole challenge was that you're going to bite the bullet.
No. Because then I'm not committing an aggression, right? The bullet.
Yeah, no, I know, but everybody. Nobody.
You have to say that the NEP always applies. That's the bullet biting.
It's the pure dodge, though, to say that if your neighbor allowed you, you'd do it. Okay, well, obviously, there's no question there. The scenario is your neighbor isn't allowing you, and you wouldn't do it because it's aggression, technically. Okay.
All right. Correction, Dave. It's the great Hans Hoppe. That's his full name. The great Hans Hermann Hoppe. You forgot that.
I'm not arguing with you on that.
Zulu, during the collapse of civilization, I won't be concerned about philosophy. I was sitting in 10-degree snowstorm to harvest venison the other day for fun. Now I'm out and doing so during the collapse. Zulu, if you want to say something really quick to that.
I mean, yeah, then just don't operate on principle. Just start flailing around and you'll get yourself into bad situations. Like that's what it means to abandon principle.
But then again, if your kids are being tortured to death, that's for a lot of us like the worst position.
Era BN Pleb for $10. Thank you. Question for Zulu: is minarchist Ron Paul a libertarian?
So if he's rejecting the NEP, then yeah, I would say he's not a libertarian. But the great part about Ron Paul is that he isn't counter signaling people who do believe in the NEP. He doesn't go around doing that. So he's massively positive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand where your criticism of me could be, that I'm like counter signaling you guys, but you know, like from my perspective, being out there doing what I'm doing, I just don't know if you guys appreciate. You would probably appreciate this about other groups of people, other groups of libertarians or people who identify as libertarian. They're just like, there's some baggage. Rothbard wrote about this himself. Great articles Rothbard wrote in 89 and 90 about the problem with libertarians, particularly in the Libertarian Party. But it's like, there's also an argument that like, I got to get some of this goofy stench off of the term libertarian. And so, sorry if you feel like I'm counter signaling you too much, but there's a perception out there that libertarians are for open borders under current circumstances. I think that's suicidal for our nation. And so I want to let it be known that like, no, there's a whole other school of libertarians who don't think that way, including Ron Paul, Murray Rothbard, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Lou Rockwell, Tom Woods, Scott Horton, you know, like a pretty goddamn big percentage of our best intellectuals just reject everything that you're saying here. And like, that's okay. I'm not appealing to authority. I'm not saying that proves that I'm right. It does seem to me like maybe not exactly an appeal to authority if like I say that Ron Paul himself thinks that I'm doing a really great job and has told me that, gone out of his way to tell me that on several occasions. That does seem to kind of conflict with your idea that I'm betraying the Ron Paul, you know.
Again, I think it also goes to the comment you responded on earlier. Like any movement that's saying you and Ron Paul and technically Kinsella and technically Hoppe and technically Rothbard and technically Mises, it's just like what is a libertarian if all these people aren't libertarian?
Listen, look, if you're just going to bite the bullet on this stuff, then the truth is that Zulu, if he wants to keep this title, he might lose it. He's got to be the most consistent motherfucker here. See, since that's you now. And you got to say, by the way, for your post stream, this is all tongue in cheek. But if you want that title, then truthfully, really what you should say is that everyone except you and your followers is out. None of us are the real libertarians. So that's the movement. It's a YouTube channel with 5,000 followers. Like, I don't know. None of these guys, nobody has ever said libertarianism is what you're claiming it is.
So let's take the case of Hoppe, for instance. Now, he does believe in somewhat of a restricted immigration system. Obviously, anybody can go read his article for that. But the fundamental point with Hoppe there is he isn't saying, well, now we've got to get rid of the NEP here because it's just too icky to have the NEP here. He believes, I disagree with him, but he believes he's coming to this position from the NEP, right? So that he's still a libertarian there.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
Well, I think Dave's I think even where I disagree with Dave, he's tried to argue his positions from.
Yes, I mean Hoppe's. You're talking about the guy who's been most influential on my immigration views, and I'm sorry, you're making a distinction there that just isn't correct. Hoppe, and I saw in your video, it was one of the many things that you got wrong in the video. But when you point out that article, which I know well, where you go, Hoppe's actually arguing that free trade is the answer to the immigration problem. It's like, yeah, I mean the article was him critiquing Pat Buchanan. He was making the point that if you guys really don't want immigrants, you shouldn't be pushing this protectionism stuff too, because that's going to lead to more immigrants coming here. Hans Hermann Hoppe, as of 2017 and then again in 2018, put immigration as the #1 issue, above war and peace. He put immigration into Europe and the United States of America as the #1 issue. So do whatever dance or rationalization you got to say why he's okay.
I never claimed that Hoppe was for open borders. In fact, in this libertarian video, I say, hey, look, I've gone over Hoppe's entire article piece by piece in this other video, which you got to go there to watch it, because I was focusing in, not on borders specifically, I was focusing in on pragmatism. I was using you as the acolyte of pragmatism. So
yeah, right. I know, and it's all you got it all wrong. But the point is that Hoppe wasn't like saying you were using the article to suggest that even when asked about immigration, Hoppe brings it back to these very good libertarian policies that I actually agree with too, like free trade. But it's just not true. They're just in the same,
correct.
Look, man,
the big problem with immigration comes about with protectionism. I agree with him on that.
Okay,
right?
sure. So we probably mostly agree on that. Listen, I don't even mean to cut you off, dude. I am on a time limit, and I do got to wrap up on this, dude. I will say, Zulu, it was very nice to meet you, dude. I'm happy to do like more, you know, collabs with you in the future or whatever. And it doesn't even have to be a debate. We could talk about other issues and shit that we agree on and stuff like that. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate you, Jacob, for moderating.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of your night.
All right, take it easy, fellas.
See ya.
Yep. All right, I'll switch to this view quick, and I'm just gonna read through. We have like
when you
5
switch to
more.
that view, it looks like my hair got shorter. I don't know what some weird optical illusion.
I don't know. That's funny. All right, so let's get through these. The debate is principle libertarianism and realistic application. Zulu is struggling, forgetting with the latter part. Dave is balanced between the two.
Oh, so that's right there. That is based on the premise that there's a dichotomy between theory and practice. That you've got to abandon theory in order to get to the realistic application, right? So you got to. He's saying that the dichotomy is between principled libertarianism and realistic application. So you got to be unprincipled to have a realistic application. In fact, Dave in this debate rejected the theory practice dichotomy. So,
I would say, I mean, at this point, it's just there's been so much that's been said. My brain's muddled, so I'll have to go back and re-listen to this to know what everyone actually said. But what I would say to this right now in this moment is that I don't think that they are necessarily like polar opposites, but I just think that theory informs strategy, but that it doesn't give you. It's not exhaustive of what strategy is. Like you need strategy to go with your theory and your principles.
right, and I believe that there is objective ways of coming to strategy. I think it is something which you can study. It's not just
right.
I feel like this. I just want to do this at the moment.
Well, no, I agree. Shout out to the American Liberty Caucus. Yeah, shout out to them. Also, shout out to Are You Smarter Than a Politician? I'll be on that show the 19th. But I know they said they want to get you on, Zulu, so I'll be sure to help you guys get in touch if they haven't reached out already.
Yeah, I think I followed the lady who was saying that. So presumably at some point she can like give me a DM now, because before I don't think she was able to.
Paul 2861, Dave has said before he's trying to get libertarians to be less autistic and normies to be more autistic. It's worked for the debate too. Yeah, that's I think a good way of putting it.
I do want to kind of comment on the autistic remark, because what does it really mean when these people come out and say you're being autistic? What they're identifying there is that actual consistent philosophy means that you've got some sort of mental illness there. I find it very insulting and very revealing. Right? They won't come out and explicitly say it. Sometimes they'll say it, but then when you push them on it, they will say, no, I'm still being consistent and everything. But then on the other hand, they'll say, whenever somebody is consistent, they'll say, oh my God, you've got a mental illness. You're a deficient person. Like
so I can understand where maybe it comes across as insulting, and I personally try to not use the autistic word or label to describe this too much, but I think what Dave and I are trying to press you and your guys on, which I still feel like we didn't make any headway, is not that the theory doesn't matter. And it's not that we want to abandon the non-aggression principle. We just think that acting in the real world, while it's informed by theory, there are things outside of libertarian legal theory proper that you know, and I try to press Dave on this because I think you have a point that like we should be concerned about avoiding these situations, obviously. And there's a reductio ad absurdum to what I'm about to say that just says, go through life blundering like an idiot and just, you know, always be in the position where you have to aggress to avoid negative outcomes. And I agree we should be wary of that reductio. But I just think in general, there can be unforeseen circumstances that put you in bad situations where, yeah, like I value not being a criminal. And God says, "Do not steal." But you know, I think even you kind of said, yeah, people can be pushed to a breaking point, and all we're saying is, yeah, if I'm put to this breaking point, then I'm going to tragically be like, I'm going to plead not just. I'm going to be clear here. I'm going to plead not just with a court. I'm going to plead with God, who I think is King of the universe and Judge of my eternal soul, and say, hate that I felt like I didn't see any other way out of this, and I had to do this aggression to save my child, and I'm going to pray for forgiveness from God, and I'm going to, plead for mercy from the legal system. And if I don't get mercy, then I'm going to have to pay whatever the consequences are. But to me, I don't see at any point there where me or Dave are saying, well, the NAP doesn't apply.
Well,
There's
then
a huge disconnect there.
Well, hold on, because then I'm correct. Then the debate proposition has been conceded to me, because the resolution, again, insists that it's always wrong to violate the NEP. There, you've got to hold that it was wrong for you to do that, because now you're pleading for your eternal soul. Like, you must have thought that was pretty wrong to do, right? So
I think it was legally wrong, but I just think it was...
Which means it's also immoral.
I guess, yeah. I guess you could say it was morally... It was morally wrong too, but you just weighted against. It was more morally wrong to let my child or family member die than to do the aggression.
Well, so let's just, I don't want to necessarily, push you too much on have a religious debate here or anything, but surely, obviously I don't know anything about Christianity, or at least not much. Surely you must hold that you must have some amount of faith that God wouldn't ever put you in a situation where you literally had to aggress in order to keep flourishing, or whatever it is, keep worshiping him in the correct way, however you want to define that, right? So then don't give yourself that escape hatch. You should go, okay, well, God would never do that to me. So now I've got to really, given the NEP, I've got to analyze the situation, try and find another way out. And that's all I'm saying. That's in my video.
I was listening to, I think that stream you did with Acorn. And you said something which I think relates to this, that with the trolley problem, obviously there's the question that trolley problem wants you to answer. But then in real life, you obviously always first try to exhaust, you go running down the trolley and you're like, where's the train? How do I stop it? Right? Yeah, of course, in real life, when I'm presented with this situation where we don't know all the exact hypotheticals, and you're saying I either have to aggress, steal something, or let my child die. Well, yeah, I would probably, depending on what the time frame was, I'd try to exhaust whatever options I had to be is there a way out of this situation without aggressing? But it's just okay, when time's up, and if I haven't found that way, well, then I got to make a choice, right? So I agree with you. If I was put in a situation where I was, I'd probably be praying to God, even I'd be looking for a way out. I'd be praying to God and pleading for something. And listen, outside of libertarian norms here, as a Christian, you could make a compelling argument that in that moment, I should have an unyielding faith that doing the right thing, that God will intervene and do something. So that there could be a fair argument there. On the other hand, it is a little complex, because God, that's not to say that God is going to prevent all bad things from happening to you. That is not a given based on faith in God. It says that you will still face hardships in this life, both just in general and you'll be persecuted for the sake of. Now, I think it's actually, for a Christian, if we're facing persecution because of our faith in Christ, that is the one thing I will not deviate from. I would not renounce. Well, I say I would not renounce Christ. Now, sure, I don't know, maybe if you tortured me for 100 days,
did you like Job or something?
Yeah, something ridiculous like that. And same thing for the theft. I'd probably, I think any reasonable person, and Dave, if you were still here, would be like, yeah, sure, you'd try to find a way. But I also feel like I'd be on solid ground to go to God and say, God, I know you've commanded to not steal, but you also commanded me to protect my child. And just in my lack of total faith, I did this, and now I'm, so.
I do want to clarify. I'm not claiming that I am fucking the Terminator and I could withstand infinite torture without ever cracking. I'm not claiming that. I very well might have some point where I would crack. But that's not the question which is really being asked. The question that's really being asked is, what should you do if you keep your wherewithal and you really are, you're John Galt, in this situation, you are able to maintain actually being able to focus on your philosophy under any amount of duress, then yeah, the philosophy doesn't change. It doesn't change and say, oh, now it's fine to act based on your whims. That's the point I'm making. I'm making the moral point here. Again, I'm being a philosopher.
No, and I think there's a place for you in the movement, obviously. I think there's a risk. The way I frame this entire debate, which I still feel strongly convicted of, is that there is a risk on both sides here that I think you and Dave are trying to steelman to the other camp, which is the risk of whim worship. And then there's the risk of whatever you want to call it, like ideological paralysis. It's probably a better word for it than capture, but let's see here. CS Townshed sent $2. Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get to this when Dave was still here. There was just an abundance of super chats, and it's already been 3 hours now. But yeah, I think Dave would be good on that show as well. I think Zulu would be good on that show. It's a lot of fun.
Maybe we go on together and we have round 2 or something.
That would be hilarious.
Just completely hijack the whole stream.
Hey Jacob, what's your favorite Dave Smith joke? It's like I'm so tired I can't even think of one right now. I've only seen I knew Dave Smith as a podcaster and libertarian before I knew him as a comedian. I've only ever been to one of his comedy shows. And then I remember watching Libertas, like his Liberty special. A lot of his stuff is political humor, and it's like riffing on Trump. I think there's one where he's like comparing our government to he's like making fun of leftists who think that they're stopping fascism, as if we don't live under fascism now. And he says something like, "You think Hitler wouldn't look at look at us and be like, damn, they gave the Department of Education a SWAT team." Like those fuckers are good. Like that was a joke. I was just like, so anyway, yeah. That's the only one I can remember at the top of my head. Zulu, Austrian ordinal theory only describes revealed preference in a specific situation, not general normative commitment.
So again, I think where this came up was that Dave was asking Jacob, quantify how much you love your wife, how much you love your children. And I'm saying, I agree with the Austrians that I don't think there is actually a cardinal value. I don't think you can say you value your kids 32 units of love or something like that. I don't think you can do that, right? Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I really do think it's ordinal. You could say, I value my kids more than my car or something like that. I think that's valid to say. I think you really, if introspectively, I've never had a situation where I go, I actually value my water bottle 300 units of something. I've never had that introspectively. All I've ever been able to reveal through introspection is that I do have, ordinal preferences. That's sort of what I'm getting at there.
Gotcha. Free men die free, $20. My last super chat. We are not enemies, so the hostility is tiresome. The Zulu camp is good for keeping us all grounded. The Dave camp is good for moving beyond such a small debate club. Play to our strengths. We have real enemies. I agree with every word of this, because I think you would even where we disagree, I hope you can tell that I am trying to point out that there is I think that Dave has a point that we have to be concerned about these sort of I think we're looking at these reductio cases to compare to the general case of how do principles guide us to a more free society, and you have a particular view of strategy that where you think there's no dichotomy, or at least not a conflict between theory and strategy. And it's I want to believe that too. I think I'm more humble on that, and I just don't know that it's a given, which I think next time we talk, I think we need to get into the correspondence theory of truth, because I'm still not following your argumentation there completely. But I just don't take it as a given that if every libertarian is perfectly following their principles, that this will get us to a freer society, or that even if we had some kind of crystal ball and clairvoyance to look into the future and see here are the steps to get to a free society, I don't think it's a given that they're all going to be linear reductions or crystal clear trade-offs. Like I said something in the Discord earlier, like, would you abolish the income tax and replace it with a slight raise in property taxes across the board if you were convinced that it was a net reduction in taxation? Now, like, I think it's hard because on one hand that maybe it's a net reduction in taxation, but you might be increasing aggression against certain people just depending on their own economic situation, right? So I think there are complex, and listen, like, I think Dave's wrong on mass deportations, but I think immigration is another one of these complex situations where, like, I'm looking for some kind of, like, is there something closer to like a Hoppian way out of this that's not full open borders in the interim, but that's not, take the entire military and put them on our border, to use the line.
Yeah, and I do want to say, like, there's this great series on YouTube, by the way. Everybody should watch it. It's called Libertarian Leninism, and it's by Springtime of Nations. And they do have like a hypothetical in there, just to bring up your crystal ball thing. They had the same thing. It's like, okay, imagine you could like, you like had like a time traveler from the future, and you asked, and he said, hey, we achieved anarcho-capitalism, and you ask him how they did it. The answer he would give would definitely not be, well, we all just voted in the most important elections of our lifetimes. It would be some sort of radicalism, That's how I really do believe.
I agree with you. I just think, and I've been at it with your camp and like even the Arizona LP. It's like I think we have different standards of radicalism, because I just think that, like, you go to any average person in America right now and tell them, like, I'm a minarchist. That means I think that the only thing the government should do is courts. That's it. No welfare state, no roads, no, like, not even, like, maybe they organize a militia if we're invaded, but no standing military. And we're going to fund this voluntarily. And I'm trying to think of the other issues. Like, we're not going to, I mean, at that point, probably no immigration policy, no economic regulations. Like, people are going to look at that. And then, like, if you and I try to, if like a really, like, the most principled minarchist gave them their answer, and then we came up and explained anarcho-capitalism to them, the person might just be like, I don't even know what the difference is. You both sound like insane people who want to destroy my society and take away, like, everything that makes society function. So my point just being that, like, being a minarchist, hell, being a constitutionalist right now is being radical. So it's like, I just have a lot of questions on, like, what is a libertarian? If being a libertarian means just being an anarchist, why do we have two different words? And then the other thing being, like, if the wedge is pragmatism versus radicalism, I mean, are only anarchist radicals? Because I don't think that follows either.
Yeah, so it depends on the philosophy. So you could be a radical communist, for instance, and you would be a radical. But as far as libertarianism is concerned, to be a radical libertarian, you shouldn't ever be abrogating your principles and, kind of, let's put the principles off to the side for now because I'm trying to get, relevancy in, like, Washington or whatever. I want to be like the moderate. I just like, fiscally liberal, socially conservative, or whatever it is. That's. I think I got that the wrong way around, actually.
We're 3 hours in. And
that was a joke.
Gosh, what time is it there? You're like, it's like 3 o'clock your time now.
4 in the morning.
Jesus. Let's try to plow through these because I'm sure you want to get to bed. There's only a few left. Will Jesus be perfect if he stole a penny to save a world? Probably meant the world or a world. I don't know. Well, I mean, Jesus wouldn't have to steal a penny to save the world. He could. He's Jesus. He's God. It's kind of a non sequitur at that point. Which, that's the strong objection from the Christian point of view, is to be like, have faith that God will, there's more of an argument there. But if you take the Christian element out of it, it's a little bit tougher. Autism is not a mental illness; it's a cognitive difference. And I think it's just like.
I mean, I would say, like, say that to someone who's, like, non-verbal, like they can't.
We need different words. Like, I think we need different words for people who are just on the spectrum versus, like, what you're talking about, like full blown non-verbal autistic, like, because we use the same word to describe both, and it is kind of clumsy and inaccurate. Sniper Fi 9, thank you very much for the $50 super chat. I think this even came after Dave left, so appreciate that a lot. I don't think that save mother for $1 violates the NAP. Agency is a precondition for argumentation, and the NAP is the intersection of agents. Coercion removes agency, so the coercer and the robbed victim are the ones in question for the NAP.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, this is what I was getting at way early on in the debate, where I was like, okay, well, let's take the bank teller example, where someone's putting a gun to your head and saying, hey, empty the cash drawer. There's an analysis there where it's like, actually, it's the person who's holding the gun. They are controlling. Now, I think there is research to be done to, like, figure out the exact limitations of this and, try and ground it. This is something which, I haven't looked into very heavily. But the point is that the way you approach that isn't to say, well, I guess principles are dead. Who needs principles? You start to look into it. It's like, okay, well, check the premises. Is this actually an aggression in this situation? Or is there such a thing as coercing someone? Is that equivalent to literally grabbing their arms and trying to move their hands to pick up cash for you? There is a question there. And that is the correct way to approach it. You actually ask these questions. Is this literally aggression? Now, I don't think Dave was really liking that very much, because he just wanted the quick, do you accept that? And it's like, well, hold on, there's a whole bunch of snuck premises there. We have to actually look into the snuck premises.
Yeah, and I get your point, but I also get his point, and it can just be hard to find the right reductio to talk about, where you're just like, you get to the heart of the matter of, like, there isn't a clear non-aggressive way out of a bad situation. Which I think, to your point, like, yeah, try to think about those ahead of time and not get into them. But we can, and I think we talked about this last time, like, the stealing a ladder to save your grandmother, but you even said that, like, that was more if the owner had said explicitly, don't steal my ladder. Whereas,
Yeah,
like,
and like I was talking with my friend Man at one point about the situation of the ladder, and he made a great point about this. Whereas, like, imagine if your neighbor came up to you and said, hey, if within the next hour, he checks his watch, if within the next hour, your house were to be burning down, and your grandmother, she lives up in that bedroom there. If your grandmother is about to die of this fire, you better not take that ladder right there. And sure enough, you turn around and the house is ablaze. Clearly, this person is an arsonist and they've set your house on fire. Turn back around and shoot them until they're dead, and then take the goddamn ladder.
Yeah. No, yeah. I like that. I think there's a point to what you're doing, which in a debate, it can feel like a dodge. That's the problem with doing this as a debate, is that, like, it's easier to get to these points when you're just talking about it and not doing a debate. But, he said he's open to future conversations, and I'd be happy to try to make those happen at some point.
Maybe we might even find something where we agree, and we can agree all day long. But my main point is why I didn't go into it with that. First of all, I think 0% chance that Dave ever accepts if I'm like, hey, Dave, let's talk about war again. You'll be like, no, fuck off. I do that already on all these other shows, so it doesn't need to happen. So I think Dave agreed with this, that if I hadn't been so inflammatory, this never none of this would have happened. So that's why I had to do that.
There's something. I think you could have been just as aggressive, but I don't know. I mean, it's just nitpicks at that point, I think, is where I would be going with that. Last one, Fear the Old Blood 64 for $2. Appreciate that. Is there a Zulu Discord? I might have to join it. There is. I know you kind of keep the Discord link kind of gate kept, so I mean, it's up to you if you want to.
Yeah, we've got closed borders. This is what people like. I've got closed borders on it. So
you have a very strong eviction policy too.
Yeah. Very strong. So I will say that for the Discord, whenever like I release like a mainline edited video, then I release a link along with it so that people can, to celebrate because if I didn't do that, if I just kept it open all the time, it would be just constant influx of new people. You wouldn't really get to have like an actual community building up there. So I think it is, I used to have it open all the time, but it does have its
so you open the borders. and then you close them so that they get integrated into your society, and then you
And
reopen.
I'll also say, to anybody who's like, if anybody's given me money, like, you know, on like Kofi or whatever, I always respond to Kofi DMs. But if you've given me money, it's like, hey, look, I've given you money here. Can I join the Discord? Then absolutely, I'll let those people in, because that self-selects for, you know, people who are going to have better conversations, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean your Discord is a bit of a gauntlet, but it's fun. Like it's kind of intellectually stimulating to go in there and have to think on your feet very quickly and debate, like, you know, you say one thing controversial in there, you're debating 10 people. Like I guess you have enough people across different time zones. It doesn't matter when you do it. It's just like they come out of the woodworks and start debating. It's kind of impressive.
And
All
I
right.
love them for it. I'd love to have a place where you can actually do that type of thing, where you can like really test your theory against, you know, people. And that's why I'm so strong against people who kind of make a point and then weasel away from it. I'm like, okay, well, you just don't belong here.
Yeah, I think some people are not good at making syllogisms.
Mhm.
I mean, to be fair, it's like I'm not even the best at making syllogisms, but I know enough about syllogisms to know that like you, it is hard to make. It's hard to make them on the fly, if you've not done it before, because you have to actually think through the way to construct it. Well, we've made it through the end of the super chats. I'm exhausted. I don't know how you're running. You must be like,
I
I'm
actually took
thinking
a
like
nap before. I took a nap before the
that makes
debates. I'm
sense.
actually
It's
quite
funny.
good.
It's funny. Like I'm thinking about, you know, you're sitting there chugging your drink, which I assume has caffeine, and I'm like, I'm going back and I don't play video games much anymore, but I'm going back and replaying Fallout 4 on survival mode, and in Fallout 4 survival mode, you can only save the game if you sleep, and you have to sleep or your character gets fatigued unless you drink Nuka-Cola, which has caffeine and keeps yourself going. And I'm literally on like I think in game time 5 days in a row where my character hasn't slept, and I just keep on chugging Nuka-Colas to keep him going and keep the adrenaline bonus going. So I was thinking about that kind of humorously the entire time. That like you're up so late and chugging a energy drink or something.
It was a tea, actually. It's my Dairy Girls cup. I believe it's my mother's, actually. But yeah, there you go.
All right, cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for all the super chats. I know yeah, this was a bit of a slugfest. 3 hours, 16 minutes. Might be the longest stream I've ever done. I feel like that went well. I feel like it could have gone a lot worse, so I'm happy. Listen, I am not a professional moderator, but I was the person willing to host this. So I tried to be as moderate as I could, but trying to like I agree with a lot of Dave's premises, but I think he does need pushed on the immigration stuff still, because I just feel like that's you know, like if you're gonna do the whole it's just trade-offs, then like fine, but like I think you'd even agree with me. There's a big gap in trade-offs between letting public schools keep homeless drug addicts out and, you know, uh, standing militarized police state in America. So, because that's what it takes to do mass deportations. I think we're learning that. But yeah, this was good. I'm going to end the stream now. I know Zulu, you're going to do a makeup for those of you who are watching. I know, and I'll just say it again so people know. If you were watching this on Zulu's side, because we kind of did this through my StreamYard so that the quality was a little bit better. But you said
Hopefully,
you're going to.
was I still lagging out badly? Or was it better
Yeah,
this time?
unfortunately, I think it's just your internet. Like the next
Fuck.
time we do this, I probably just need to stream on 720p, because that might just be doing it at 1080 might just be pushing it too hard. Because I even for this one, like we're only streaming to 2 channels, and I usually for most of my streams I do YouTube and X and Facebook and Rumble, and this time it's just one. So I think it's just cross continental and internet speed, but maybe dropping down to 720
Also,
720p will help.
my area of Scotland, I remember one time my dad was driving and he heard on the radio that the worst internet in all of Scotland was like right nearby me. I won't go into any further details than that because I don't want to dox myself. It's sometimes quite bad. So I might need to just get like a big, like 100-meter long, Ethernet cable or something, and just connect right down to the router downstairs or something.
Yeah, you can get really long ones like that, which does help. Yeah, no, I internet's tough. I'm lucky that they just installed fiber in my town like a few months ago, so I switched to high speed. But before that, my streams were not the best either. So hopefully Scotland gets you something good soon. But yeah, thanks everybody. And yeah, I don't think I finished my thought. You're going to do a stream reading the super chats on your end at some point, so people can follow you, and if they super chatted on your end, they can watch that. I felt bad the last time I had Dave on. It was impromptu, and a lot of people super chatted, and I didn't get any chance to read them. So I was committed to make sure I did that this time. I know you want to do that with yours too. We appreciate you guys supporting us content creators, and yeah, that's all I have for you guys for tonight. I will be, let's see on my end, I'll be back again Monday. I'm actually doing 2 streams on Monday. I'm doing a stream with DL Cummings, and we're starting a new thing where we do a dad talk. There's going to be 4 libertarian dads, although I guess I'm the only libertarian there because I'm the only ANCAP, I think, in the group. The rest are minarchists. So not to drag that back up again. But that'll be at 8 o'clock. And then at 9:30, I'll be live with Brent Freeman from the Aiming Up podcast. And that'll be on Smarter Than a Politician on the 19th. So that's what I have coming up. Do you have anything you want to plug, Zulu?
Not at the moment, no, because I really have to take a piss. So I want to get this wrapped up as quick as possible.
Yep. All right. Thanks for talking, everybody. See you next time.
See ya.